Mike Westphal here with McDonald Garden Center, and today we're going to be talking about how and what to prune now. And what we mean by now is kind of that January to March time frame, so like late winter to early spring. So this is a great time to really do a lot of that pruning. I think, especially here in Hampton Roads, one of the major questions that people ask is how to prune crepe myrtles. I've got a crepe myrtle. I'm going to show you how to do that, and I've got a lot of other plants here that will show you how to do that. But pruning is a very, very vital part to having very healthy plants. Now you don't have to prune everything, but in some cases, pruning does help the vigor of a plant, especially if we've got crossing branches or broken branches or diseased branches. We'll be able to talk about those as well. I see a comment there about hydrangeas. I will mention hydrangeas. Hydrangeas typically we're not going to prune right now, but I will mention those because there are a couple options there for you as well. I did a whole long webinar on pruning hydrangeas, or all about hydrangeas, and we really got into the details there, but I will mention it. And I'll mention as much as I possibly can today. There's a lot of plants out there. Crepe myrtles being one, Japanese maples, I'm going to prune a couple of those. We've got some evergreens, we've got some boxwoods. But pruning really, for me, is a great way of kind of relaxing myself as well. I really get a lot of, that kind of connection with the plant. You kind of feel with the plant. Gets you outside, gets you active, gets you doing something, and it's a lot of fun, and it really puts me in a peaceful place because I like to kind of take my time, go nice and slow, and really just kind of think about the plant and not get too crazy or too fast on it. So I really love and enjoy pruning. It's one of my favorite things to do. One thing that I do want to reference, and we'll see if we can get a link up there if we can, is the Virginia Cooperative Extension. So that's based out of Virginia Tech. So for people that live here in Virginia, but even just anywhere in that kind of zone, I don't know, maybe 5 to 9 area, 5 to 8, which is what we are in, is 8A here in the Hampton Roads area. The Virginia Tech Virginia Cooperative Extension website has some great resources. I definitely recommend checking those out. We also, on that website, if you search for a guide to successful pruning, shrub pruning calendar, it's one of my favorite resources to kind of look at, especially when I'm not quite sure when I should be pruning something, because and they have a long list. I think it's somewhere around 80 plants that they have listed. My printer did not do a great job, but this is kind of what it looks like. You can't quite see it, can you? White piece of paper, not showing up real good. But it's called Shrub Pruning Calendar. You can look that up. We'll put up a link for you as well. But it's a great calendar because it kind of shows you when you can prune certain things. So it's kind of a good thing to have kind of laying around. Now you can always ask us, if you don't live in our neck of the woods and you're looking for local advice, definitely check out your local garden centers. Those associates, those employees have worked in that area for a long time. And know the area very well. So if you ever have a question about how to prune something or when to prune something, definitely reach out to us here at McDonald Garden Center or your local garden center in your area. That's where you're going to get the best advice about pruning. So let's get started. The first thing I really want to talk about is the tools. Lots and lots of pruning tools out there. In fact, look at all these. I mean, I've got a ton here laid out. I'm going to go through kind of all of them. But your basic kind of pruning tools that you're going to need is a good pair of bypass pruners. So bypass pruners, we've got lots and lots of different styles of bypass pruners. And bypass is my favorite one. So anvil pruners, I don't even carry an anvil pruner anymore. They're not really recommended anymore. Some people do sell them and you can use them for certain things. I believe a lot of florists might use them, but really for pruning in the landscape, pruning in your yard, pruning your indoor plants, outdoor plants, bypass pruners are the best. And bypass means that they are like a scissor action. So it's actually the blades passing by each other, which makes a nice clean cut. Anvil pruners have a flat surface that the blade goes into, and it actually crushes the stem. So we recommend bypass pruners. There's lots and lots of different styles out there, types, lots of different choices out there, but a good bypass pruner is going to go a long way to making you successful at pruning and making it easier for you and your hands. There's some nice ones, and so I'm going to talk about those real quick. So this one is made by Bergen & Ball. This is a really nice, this is their professional bypass pruner. So Bergen & Ball is very, very nice. Felcos, of course, are the kind of the name out there for when you're looking at pruners. So Felcos, they are expensive, but they're going to last you a long time. So I'm going to use my Felcos today. I've got my Felcos here. I've had these Felcos for probably, I don't know, maybe 15 years now. So it was the first pair I bought. I rarely ever sharpen the blade. I rarely do anything to them, and I use them all the time. So if you like to prune or you're pruning a lot, you might consider investing in something like the Felcos. This is the F2. F2 is kind of their name or their main pair of bypass pruners. They make lots and lots of tools, but they are great. This is a really, really nice one. They're going to last a long time. If you look, Bergen and balls, sorry, turn that around. Bergen and balls look almost identical. So people are starting to really kind of catch on, and they're making them a little bit less expensive. So this is a Swiss made, so it's a Swiss blade. Mine have never really rusted. Mine have never really done anything. I will say some of the other, I won't say knockoffs, but the ones that are trying to kind of emulate the Felco F2 do tend to maybe rust a little bit more. So just take care of them. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. But a good pair of bypass pruners is very, very helpful. This is the F6, which is a slightly smaller Felco. So if you got smaller hands, it's a little bit easier to grip. So there's a couple different options there. Of course, you can get just your basic bypass pruners. So let's see. So like right here, this is I brought this combo set because this has a lopper on it. We'll talk about those in a minute. But just a basic pair of pruners is really all you need. And so you don't need to spend a lot of money, especially if you're one that maybe like leaves them outside sometimes. I have a lot of inexpensive pairs of pruners laying around that I'll just grab sometimes and then I'll forget. But my Felcos, I'm always conscious about where I put those because I love them and they last a long time. So if you're doing lots of pruning, you might consider a pair of Felcos, but just an inexpensive pair of pruners will do the job just as long as they're a good bypass pruner. All right, another main tool that we're going to use a lot is the lopper. So like I just showed you there, this is a lopping shear. So it's the same thing, it's a bypass pruner. So it's the same idea as a bypass pruner, but it's a lopping shear, and what it does is just gives you a little bit more torque. It's a little bit of a bigger blade, gives you the ability to cut a little bit bigger branches off. So lopping shears are really, really helpful. We've also got, let's see, I've got hedge shears. So hedge shears are like this. So the hedge shears is a longer, same thing, bypass. It's basically a big pair of scissors, gives you a little bit more, again, torque and ability to kind of get into the plants a little bit easier. And we're going to use that really for shaping plants. So we'll use those as well. And then I mentioned the combo set. So really great kind of like little deal that you can get a pair of loppers and a pair of pruners. You can get lots and lots of different tools out there. This is a pruning saw. So pruning saws, I'm going to open this up. This is one of my favorite tools to use. You know, I didn't bring a bow saw. I rarely use a bow saw when I'm pruning, but this little folding saw is awesome. So it's basically, some people call it a banana saw, folding saw, but this is one of my favorite tools because if you're getting into a little bit of a thicker limb that your lopping shears might not be able to get into, then a folding saw is really, really helpful. And the nice thing is the blade folds away. You can tuck it in your back pocket. It's real easy to have kind of handy, put it in your pocket, or just have it in your basket of tools there and you don't have to worry about cutting yourself on that sharp blade. So pruning saws are really, really helpful as well. Let's see, we've also got, so just some other tools. These are a little bit more specific, but I just want to mention them real quick because as I said, as I was walking around looking for everything that we carry that are pruners, I ran across a lot of different things and I just want to throw them out there. Of course, these are flower scissors. So these are just basically a nice kind of pair of scissors. They're a little bit higher grade than a typical, household pair of scissors. Same thing here. So these are just scissors, so if you're cutting like deadheading or something like that, or if you're doing light little trimming, or if you're going out to cut some flowers, these are a little bit easier on the hands. You don't have to use your pruners, so this is another good little option to have handy. And then we've got, put these off to the side, and then we've got these little snips. Now these, people love these, and I do too. So this is a pair of drams. These are their compact shears, so you can see that little point there. See how pointy that is? Really is easy to kind of get into a plant. So we've got a couple different makes of those. These are called floral snips or shears or floral shears or compact shears. These are great. They're really small, so they're easy to kind of store away. They do have a kind of a pointy point, so you want to be a little bit careful about where you just tuck those. You don't want to tuck them in your back pocket or something and sit on them, but they're real easy. They've got this great little clasp here that's real easy to use. So with one hand, you can open them up and close them again. But dram makes a really nice pair. We've also got these Terra Verde snips. So really, really good options there as well, especially working on smaller plants. I love them for indoor plants. And that brings me to my next one is a houseplant pruner. I know I've mentioned this before. Let's see if I can take this out without making too much of a mess here. So this houseplant pruner is really nice because it's got this curved edge. And what that allows you to do is go into a plant, it nice and easily kind of parts those branches. So when you're trying to kind of clean up like a peace lily or something like that, where you need to get in there but you don't want to damage any stems, then this rounded edge really helps kind of do that. So we've got those as well, houseplant pruners. They're really nice. We've got a lot of different types of pruners here, as you can see. Of course, bonsai tools as well. So, you know, all different types of pruners for all different types of jobs. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do. We've also got a smaller dram bypass pruner. People love these. These are really nice. So it's basically like a bypass pruner, just a little bit nicer and a little bit smaller again. So for us out there that might have smaller hands. And then, of course, we've got our herb scissors. So these are really cool. So I just always like to throw this out there. I talk about these every time I talk about herbs, but these are cool. It just looks like a pair of scissors, right? Well, then you turn it this way and there's about, what, 5 blades in there. So there's 5. So when you cut it, you actually can cut up chives, you can cut up parsley and oregano and different things and just chop it up right there with these scissors. Awesome. So it's like 5 pairs of scissors in one. So you can cut up stuff into nice little fine little chops. So we've got those. So again, we've got lots and lots of pruners. And then one of the other ones, the last one that I'll show you is this little scissor by Bare Bones. These are really cool. I just think they look cool. I like to lay mine out on a shelf kind of near my houseplants. Looks like I've got a little setup there. But these are great. They're very sharp and they're very easy to use. I use this a lot for harvesting my vegetables. So when I'm going out there to cut tomatoes or strawberries or whatever it might be, these are kind of my little tool. It's got a big handle, so it's easy to kind of get your hands in there, and it's just one of my favorite tools out there. And these come with the small scissors, and then there's also a larger scissor size as well. So lots and lots of tools. The last thing I'll mention is, of course, a holster. Holsters are great. So if you're going out to do a lot of pruning, I usually keep mine in my back pocket. So you can see my holster is a little old. It's aging. But I usually just kind of stick it in my back pocket, so it's always there. You can attach it to your belt, so it's a little bit easier to grab. You got a couple different options there, but having a holster does help. But it's not necessary. You can always, I like to also throw a bunch of tools in my wheelbarrow or in a bag, and I'll just kind of carry them out to the site, so I've always got them all handy. But anything that I can kind of keep in my pockets kind of keeps it real easy for me. So a nice pair of bypass pruners, maybe a folding saw. I love these small lopping shears because they're really kind of compact. You can get larger ones if you're cutting in bigger branches, but this is another one that I love. So those are kind of some of the tools that I'm going to be using today. The last thing that I'll mention that you might need is a pair of gloves. You know, especially we're going to be talking about roses today, so you might want to get a pair of rose gloves. These have long, these are made out of leather. Got a long kind of rawhide type of covering for your arms. So this is really nice because you can slip these on and then you can really feel like you're protected against those thorns. So you got this nice long, and these are called gauntlets, typically rose gloves. Lots and lots of different types out there, but this is a really nice pair that you can use to protect your arms and your hands while pruning, especially things that are thorny like roses. But what I love to use is just a simple pair of gloves. I kind of go through gloves fairly quickly. So these are my nitrile gloves. These are just kind of a basic glove. You know, not super expensive. If I lose them, if they get damaged, I'm not going to be out a ton. So these are really nice. They're nice and tight, so I feel like I can grip and I can get in there and touch things and still kind of feel it a little bit. So I really like these. These are nitrile gloves. So I'm going to hold off on using those. I'll be honest, I don't use a lot of gloves. My hands are kind of calloused up. And so for us avid gardeners out there, you might not use gloves, but it is good to always have a pair handy, because if you're working with roses or if you're getting into something that you feel like you don't want to get on your skin, this is a great option. So always have a pair of gloves handy. I always do, even though I don't wear them that much. So we'll see if I put them on later, maybe when I do the roses. All right, so I'm going to kind of clear some of these tools out of the way. And then I'm going to just real quickly go over a brief list of some of the plants that we might prune in this area. Because there's a lot of things. So if you ever look up that list that I mentioned earlier, it's a great list. There's a lot of things on there. Some of them you might not recognize, but that's okay. So what I did was just kind of went through and made a real quick list of the things that we typically grow in our area. Now I know if you're watching across the country that some of these plants might not apply to you, but this kind of gives you a general idea and a general list of especially plants that are grown in the Virginia, Hampton Roads region that we deal with a lot. So, and what I'm specifically focusing on here is the February or January through March timeframe, maybe into early April. We'll talk about that a lot as I go through. I've got some different examples here that I'll pull up and we'll be able to prune and you'll actually be able to see. But let's go through this kind of quick list here so you can just kind of have those. And of course, all of these notes that we do from this webinar will be posted with this video when we're done. So if you ever need to go back and look at something, we do have all of our videos on our website. So you just go to our mcdonaldgardencenter.com, scroll down a little bit, you'll see a seminar, a webinar icon, and then you just click on that and all the videos are there with notes. So give us a little bit of time to get our notes up there, but then those will be up there and you'll have them. So Abelia is one. I have an Abelia. We'll prune that. So Abelia is, I love this kaleidoscope Abelia, but they can get kind of wild looking as you can see. So we'll talk about that. Now's a great time to prune those. Evergreens, so conifer evergreens like this Arborvitae here, gold mop cypress, juniper, all evergreens can be pruned right about now. Let's see, bayberry, wax myrtle, so that's a hedge plant, so kind of like chindoviburnums, bayberry, ligustrum, those all can be pruned right now, especially to shape, and we'll get into some specifics here in a little bit. But these are plants that you can prune right now. Boxwood, of course, beautyberry is another one. Vitex or chase trees, crepe myrtles, which I will do one, butterfly bush, so those kind of all, rose of Sharon is another one, those kind of all fall into that same category, summer blooming deciduous plants. Don't count hydrangeas in that group, but rose of Sharon or Althea, same plant, it's a type of hibiscus, it's a shrub hibiscus. But rose of Sharon, Althea, bloom in the summer, they lose their leaves. Let's see, what was the other one? The Vitex or the chase tree, crepe myrtles, they all bloom in the summer. Butterfly bush, those are really, really love to be pruned right now. It's going to increase vigor of growth. You're going to get bigger, better blooms because of it. And we'll teach you how to do them right. Clethra, summer sweet, same thing. Euonymus, gardenias. Gardenias, now is a great time to prune gardenias in January and February. Let's see, fruit trees, berries, so your blackberries, your blueberries, your raspberries, those all love to be pruned right now. Let's see, hydrangeas we'll talk about. We'll go into a little bit more detail there. Hollies, so hollies and boxwoods are kind of the same. Japanese maples, which we'll do. Nandina. Ornamental grasses is a great one to talk about as well. Ornamental grasses, I do say March, so we'll get into that because I do have one of those to prune. Osmanthus, January through February. Let's see, pittosporum is another common plant grown. That one is kind of the March into April time frame. We don't want to prune it too early. It's a little bit more on the tropical side. It's not as winter hardy. If you're in zone 7, you probably don't grow pittosporum. If you're in zone 8A or 8B or 9, you probably do grow pittosporum. You want to wait a little bit, make sure we're out of the scare of a hard freeze. Let's see, ligustrum I mentioned, roses will do one, and then just trees in general, deciduous trees. Even magnolias, there's the spring blooming magnolias that are deciduous. We don't want to prune those, but evergreen magnolias you can. Now is a great time for those as well. All right, so things not to prune or things to prune after they bloom. These are also very, very common plants. So we're not going to talk about these today, but a lot of people have questions about these. So azaleas, Indian hawthorn, forsythia, rhododendron, camellias, daphne, lilac. So think about all of those plants I just listed. They all bloom in the spring. So anything that's about to bloom in the next 3 to 4 months, we're probably not going to prune because those, if you prune them now, you're going to be cutting off all of their blooms. So azaleas have set buds for the spring already. Camellias have set buds. If you've got camellia plants, you probably see the buds on there, especially your spring blooming camellias. Your fall blooming camellias are probably finishing up. You might get some sporadic blooms here and there, but fall blooming camellias, the Sasanqua camellias, are pretty much done. And those you still don't want to prune yet. You really kind of want to wait till almost April, May to prune those. Let them get through the early part of spring and then prune those. But your Camellia japonicas we definitely don't want to touch. Rhododendron or like azaleas. Forsythia, which is a deciduous blooming plant, so a lot of us go out there and prune it, but those bloom on old wood, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But those are some of the things that you don't want to prune. All right, so, and then of course that list, if you go to the Virginia Tech Cooperative Extension website and you look up the shrub pruning calendar, it's my favorite. It's very, very easy to kind of follow. But again, if you've got questions, always look out to your local garden centers. They are the experts. All right, so now I want to do some actual pruning and get into it a little bit here. So I've got my tools. Let's see, I've got this guy. Make sure I've got my lopping shears. I got my pruners. I've got my folding saw and my hedge shears. In fact, I think I'm going to have to open these hedge shears because I didn't bring any. But that's okay. All right, so pruners are great for cutting zip ties off as well. All right, so we've got our hedge shears. We've got our lopping shears. A folding saw in case we'd get into anything too big. And then just my handheld pruners. So we've got lots and lots of things here. All right, the first thing I want to talk about before we get started, real quick, is sharpening your tools. Sharpening your tools, you can do, if you've got expensive tools and you want to sharpen them, you can. I've got this great little handheld, I know you can't quite see it, made by Bergen & Ball. It's a little handheld sharpening steel. And so it's real easy to use. You can get sharpening stones. You can do it lots of different ways. You can take them to certain places. We don't do it here, but you can take them. You can take your tools and get them sharpened if you want to. But it's pretty simple. This one I love because it's small, it's handy. I can stick it in my pocket. You can attach it to your keychain. It's actually magnetized, which is nice because the shavings will get stuck to it so you don't have metal shavings all over the place. But basically what you're going to do, see if I can get a little bit closer so you can see this. So you're going to take your blade and you're going to hold this at about a 25 to 30 degree angle from it. And then you're just going to go along the blade. Just like maybe 4 or 5 times. And that'll just sharpen it right up for you so you got a nice sharp blade. So you can do that to all your tools if you want to. The next thing that I'll talk about is disinfecting your tools. We talk about this a lot when we're dealing with vegetables. So when we're going out there to prune our tomatoes or peppers or cucumbers or squash or whatever it might be, we don't want to be transferring a disease from one plant to the next. So before I do anything ever, I get a little, cheapy little spray bottle. This is just a little household, cleaner spray bottle, but it's great because it's got sizing on the side. So it's got 5 ounces, 10 ounces, 15 ounces, which gives you a little bit of ability to kind of be able to do your ratios. And what I like to use is a 1:10 ratio of bleach. So I'll put 1 ounce of bleach in here, and then I'll put 10 ounces of water. And that's very, very simple. You can use mouthwash. There's actually some fungicides that you can use to kind of also treat. But I do love bleach. It's just easy. It's pretty safe. I don't have to worry about it too much. But basically all you're going to do is just open up your pruners and just give it a little bit of squirt on each side. And then I've got this handy. I can stick it in my pocket if I want to. And I've got it handy to be able to disinfect my pruners as I go from plant to plant. Generally speaking, I will wipe some of that extra moisture off. And then at the end, what I typically will do when I'm done pruning, if I've been using that bleach solution or really any solution that you might be using to disinfect your pruners, then take a little bit of WD-40 at the end before you pack them away, before you store your pruners, and just clean them off real good with WD-40, any kind of lubricant type of solution. But that'll really kind of help it from rusting because that is basically you're spraying it with water, so you don't want to get too much moisture on there. It's okay as you move from plant to plant. The bleach won't hurt the plants at that dilution rate, a 1:10 ratio. So bleach, mouthwash, rubbing alcohol, there's lots of different ones out there. You can look them up if you need to. And there's all, usually I think it's all 1:10 ratios for all of that. So one ounce of bleach to 10 ounces of water, and you've got your solution. You can use a mister. You can even use a cup. I know a lot of people will do that. I know like professional pruners actually have a holster that actually has the cleaning solution in it. You just put it in your holster, you come back out, and they're disinfected. But do clean them at the end before you pack them away with WD-40 or some sort of lubricant that helps it from rusting. All right, so I think we're ready to prune. I got everything ready here. So the first thing I want to do is, let's see, what's a good one? Let's start with a rose. Roses are really kind of, I always like to do roses. Valentine's Day is a great day to remember your roses. So if you're growing knockout roses or hybrid teas, grandiflores, floribundas, there are some slight differences. So let's go through that real quick. And I don't have any floribundas or grandiflores or hybrid teas or anything like that right now, but I do have knockout roses. And then I've got another rose that I'll be able to show you, hopefully an example of how to prune a long stem rose, a flowering type of rose that you can do. I'm going to take this tag off if I can, without getting stuck by too many thorns, just to get that out of the way. There we go. All right, so I've got this rose. This is a knockout rose. As you can see, it's kind of crazy. In the ground, these are going to be probably 4 by 4. They're going to be pretty big shrubs. I want to just kind of give you some small examples so they go faster for you and they're real easy. So the nice thing about knockout roses is you don't have to be super specific with it. This is how easy a knockout rose is. Take your hedge shears and just cut it. And just basically you want to get it to about the same size. So I will take about a 4-foot knockout rose and cut it down to about 2 feet, maybe 1.5 feet. And just like that, you can shear it off. You don't have to think about it too much. I will typically take my little handheld pruners and go through and just kind of look for any kind of crossing branches, any issues that I see. I see a branch that's literally growing from a branch down into the soil almost. And so I'll take that out just to get that out. I've got a broken branch over here, so we can take that out. So it's real simple. That's as easy as you can do a knockout rose. I could actually probably go a little bit lower if I wanted to. So I got a couple little smaller branches in there. The thicker the wood that you cut into, generally speaking, I want to say up to about a 1/4 size width, then the more growth you're going to get out of it. You don't want to, I say thicker wood, so when we get to the crepe myrtle, you wouldn't want to take it down to the ground. It's going to take a long time to come back from that. But a knockout rose or any kind of rose, the thicker that the wood that you cut into, the bigger the set of new growth is going to be and the bigger the blooms will be. So just by going through and just kind of taking this and just real simple. That's why I don't mind pruning roses. I don't really need gloves for that. It's very easy. So that's how you would do a knockout rose. Very simple. You've just got a nice compact plant, kind of inspect it, make sure you don't have any issues in there, and then you're done with that one. Now, I'm going to try and get a little bit closer here with this one so you can see. Now, please pretend with me, that this is a floribunda or hybrid tea. So, again, these are going to be 5-6 feet tall, depending on the variety. But what you want to get out of a long stem grandiflora hybrid tea is you want to get kind of a hand shape. So imagine like you take your hand and just kind of try and space out your fingers as far as you possibly can from each other. And you're going to kind of look for that kind of shape. You want good canes, and canes are your strongest points of growth. So you want about 5 to 7, maybe 9 canes at the most. And that's basically what we're going to try and get down to. So what I like to do typically is I would take the top and just kind of shear it off. So let's do that real quick. I don't need it. I'm going to take a 4-foot grandiflora hybrid tea rose, and I'm going to cut it down with my hedge shears. Maybe I might need my lopping shears to get some of those bigger branches. I'm going to take that and cut it down to about, I think it's around 16 to 18 inches, so about 1.5 feet from the ground, especially on older established roses. If you just planted it last year, you might even take it down to 12 inches, 1 foot from the ground. And I just saw a comment about drift roses. Drift roses are similar to knockout roses. So any kind of shrub rose, you can just cut it back. Cut it back. That eliminates that weaker wood and allows it to open up and really kind of grow for you. So drift roses, knockout roses, very easy shrub roses. So now I've taken my grandiflora, my pretend grandiflora, and I've cut it back some and just taken off some of the top so it's a little bit easier for me to work into. So now I'm going to take it, I'm going to look around for some of my bigger canes. I also want to open up the center. So I've got one cane here, one shoot of growth here, that's growing right up in the center. It's not super strong, and so we'll take that out. And then I've got a couple other little pieces of growth down in here. So we're really just trying to eliminate somewhat in the center all this weaker wood. Now, if you've got one of your strongest canes growing right up through the center, I'm not going to say take it off, but look around. If you've got 7 other canes that are on the outside that are equal or look just as good, then I think you're okay. You probably don't need to do much with it. All right, so I've taken out some of that center wood. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and, let's see, first I'm going to count. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 good canes. I got one little small cane over here. And when I say canes, I basically mean a big shoot of growth coming from the main crown, from that base of the plant. And then what I want to do is just basically take my canes, try and get them down to one single hard shoot. Now sometimes you might not be able to do that, and I'll show you an example because I got one here. So I'm going to take this and I want to get them outward. So let's see if you can see this one right here. So this is the one I'm talking about here. So I've got this cane's going here. Do I take this one or do I take this one? So I'm going to actually keep this one because it's further out from the center. So we'll just take this guy, cut that off, and then we're just eliminating, and then we'll just give it a nice cut. So there we go. Now we've got that strong cane. Now again, pretend with me that this is a bigger, stronger rose. This is not going to hurt this rose, but just kind of, that's what we're kind of going after. Now you typically want to cut at a 45-degree angle. I know I haven't mentioned that yet. With your knockout roses and your hedge shears, not super important. If you want to get real specific, you can go in and cut at those angles, but you don't have to. So with a Floribunda grandiflora, a nice rose, you do want to cut at a 45-degree angle away from the bud. So I'll try and show you that if I've got a good example here somewhere. All right, so here, this one, the stronger cane is going this way. We're going to take this growth off. And then here we go. Let's see if I can show you here. All right, let's see if you can see this here. But right here, I've got a bud. It's shooting off the stem. So I'm definitely not going to be able to show you. It's a little bit too small. But basically, I'm going to cut away from that bud. And what you're doing is cutting at a 45-degree angle away from the bud. Here you go. I've got a little whiteboard here. So I can draw this, for example. Let's see if this works out. Let's see. I've got a branch coming up. All right, so there's my branch, right? And there's my bud. You can see your bud. So you're going to cut at a 45-degree angle away from the bud. So that's what you want to do. So that if any water gets on here, it's going to go off. If this were a flat cut, the water could stay on top, and you don't want water sitting on top of your fresh open prunes. And this way it's going to go away, but it's not going to go into that bud, into where the bud meets the stem. And so that really does help when you are pruning to kind of look for those, especially your long stem roses. So it really, really does help. All right, so then we're going to take this one. I've got another bud. It's outward facing. That's perfect. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I've come up with a little bit of a challenge here. So this is a big piece. It's got really equal kind of growth habit to it. Let's see if I can get down to 1 cane. But I have a feeling that I'm going to want to keep 2 of these. And here's another great tip. You can't put it back on. So pruning in or pruning from the outside in is always sometimes better. Because once you take it off, you're not going to be able to put it back on again. Now, if you make a mistake, not the end of the world either. Plants are plants. They're going to grow back for the most part, so you're not going to make any major mistakes. But it's always a good thing to kind of think about where you're going to prune before you just go ahead and cut. All right, let's see here. Find my bud. There we go. So that's what you want, your Hybrid grandiflora. Let's see, put it up against that background so you can really see it. So you can see they're all spaced out. Now what I did with this last branch here was I kept 2. You can do that. I probably could eliminate this one because this one's pretty strong. It's got a good bud on it, but because it's a pretty big branch, I don't really have anything over here. It's kind of empty in this space, so that'll fill that and that'll fill that. But then everything else is a single cane. So when you go to prune your roses, this is a great way to end up with 5 to 7 canes in a hand shape. I mean, that almost emulates a hand right there. And that's what you want. And now this is a smaller, this is a different type of rose. It's not a true Hybrid grandiflora. So you typically are going to have bigger shoots. You're going to have thicker shoots. They're going to be straight as an arrow, so that's fine. And you just want to collect those ones from the outside and eliminate some of the center ones. So hopefully that helped you with your roses when you're pruning your roses. All right. So roses are pretty easy. Now roses, once they start growing, there are specific ways to prune those. I'll mention that real quick, especially on Hybrid or grandifloras. Knockout roses, if they've kind of done a big bloom set and you really kind of want to control the size a little bit, pruning in the summer is not a problem. You can hedge shear them again. You can just cut them off. They'll grow right back. You don't have to be super specific with it. With Hybrid grandifloras, floribundas, you do want to be pretty specific about how you prune, deadhead, or cut your flowers off your shrub or off your Hybrid roses. What you want to do is take either a dead bloom or a bloom that you're going to take inside and put in a vase or something. So if you're cutting them for the flowers or if you're cutting them to regrow, you're doing the same thing. But what you want to do is just take your hand pruners, follow that stem down to the first leaves of 7. So when you look at your roses, you're going to see leaflets that have 3 leaves, 5 leaves, and then 7 leaves. It's typically about 3 or 4 leaflets down that you're going to find that. But trying to find the first one with 7. Now, if you don't find 7, that's okay. Go to like the 3rd or 4th, 5th leaflet set. But basically, and we'll try and do a video in the summer when we have some knockout roses on, or I have some hybrid teas, so I can actually show you how to do that. But it's real simple, and I always say go one further. So I'll usually come down, I found my first leaflet of 7, and then I'm gonna go one more down from that. 45-degree angle away from that bud, you'll get a new shoot. And what you're doing again is you're cutting into thicker wood, which means you're gonna get a bigger bloom. If you just cut that deadhead off the top, if you just cut that seed pod or that flower off at the top, one, you're not gonna have a very long stem to use if you're using them in an arrangement, but also you're gonna get very weak new growth, and you're not gonna get a very vigorous shrub or a very vigorous flower from that. So always cut a little bit deeper, go one more further than you typically would, and I think that's a very helpful tip to kind of eliminate us cutting too finicky. Be careful, you can't put it back on, but also when you're cutting to get more blooms, a little bit deeper gives you a bigger bloom. All right, so the next thing I want to do is, let's do boxwoods. Boxwoods and hollies are very similar. I got this one right here. You know, a lot of us have evergreen type of shrubs in the area. So let's talk about evergreens real quick. Evergreens, why do they have leaves on them all winter long? Because they continue to go through the photosynthesis process and produce food for themselves. So you do not want to cut an evergreen plant as we go into winter, especially in that kind of October, November timeframe, really hard. Now, if I were gonna make a wreath like I've done before, then I might go and take some select clippings out of this plant. But if I'm pruning it hard, if I'm pruning it to shape, I don't typically want to do that in the early winter, late fall time frame, because they need their leaves to survive. They put those leaves on there so that they can make it through the winter time frame. So don't eliminate it and cut it back to nothingness, because it won't come back. Because sitting there without being able to produce new leaves all winter long typically means it won't come back. Now, if it's an old one and it's got a really, really good established root system, you might be okay, but it's gonna be some time before it ever kind of gets back to that same vigor that you had. So now's a great time to kind of shape. Now, I almost really, with hollies and boxwoods, I'll usually wait till about March to really shape them. If you start to see new growth cracking, then you're okay. It's still okay to prune after that. So if we get a warm kind of end of February, watch your weather, of course, always watch your weather, but that might help with your pruning. All right, so how to prune a holly, a boxwood. Now, I will also tell you this kind of quick trick. I did not bring a holly in here, but hollies, this is another great place to kind of draw something for you here. This will help you identify whether you've got a holly or a boxwood. So a boxwood is going to have a branch, and then it's going to have a leaf here and here. And here and here. Sorry, not a great drawing. But boxwoods, the leaves are going to meet at the same exact spot on your branch. Hollies are going to have a leaf here, leaf here. So there you go. You can see the difference. This is a holly. They hit alternately, so your leaves are going to hit alternately on that branch. And then a boxwood, the leaves are going to hit at the exact same point on that branch. So it kind of helps you know, hollies or boxwoods are much, much more expensive and a little bit more valued in the landscape. So if you're going to go butcher a plant, don't do it to a boxwood. It's going to take a lot longer for it to come back. But boxwoods and hollies are very similar. I like to wait till March to prune them, but I'm going to tidy this one up for you just so you can see. This is where I'm going to use my head shears. Now, I could use hand pruners if you want to get real kind of specific and not cut into any leaves. Boxwoods specifically, if you cut with head shears and you cut that leaf, you're going to get a little white mark. It's going to basically be a scab where you cut that leaf in half. That's okay, it doesn't hurt the plant, but some people might think it's a little unsightly. Once it flushes out with new growth, you'll never even see it again. But if you wanted to, you can go through and be very careful about where you prune and use your hand pruners. It's going to take a lot longer. And what we really want to do is shape this plant. So I'm just going to take my head shears and just shape the plant. It's real simple. It's real easy. Don't have to get real specific. And all I'm doing is just kind of taking some of those wild shoots of growth off and just getting it back down to the size that I want. So this could be done for shaping. This could be done to control size. There's lots and lots of reasons to prune. So there we go. Now this is in a pot, but imagine it in the landscape, it will look nice and round and shaped. And again, even if you've got, or if you've got a plant that maybe is a little misshaped, and we want to correct it, we can correct it. So like this one you can see is kind of leaning a little bit that way. That's okay. I think this prune will help. I pruned over here lightly. It's the slightly smaller side, but I pruned over here lightly to increase vigor of plant or to increase the growth that comes this spring. But I've also pruned over here to kind of keep it in check. And what I might do is wait probably till about the May time frame, give it about 2 months to reflush, get some new growth on it, and then I might go and check it again. Check this side back in, tighten this up a little bit to allow it to kind of catch up and get that nice round shape. So boxwoods, hollies are all very similar. And what I mean by hollies is the softleaf hollies. Now your prickly hollies, the ones that have berries on them, if they've got berries, leave them. The birds are going to love them. But as soon as the birds get them all, then you can go out there and do a nice shaping prune on your prickly hollies, your Foster hollies, your Nellie Stevens, American hollies, all the ones that get berries on them. You can go and prune those once all the berries get eaten up. If you want to do it before that, it's okay, but the birds will appreciate it if you let them stay on there. They'll come and gobble them up pretty soon when we got really cold weather and they can't get into the ground to get some food. All right, so here's another boxwood. Real simple. You're going to see this a lot when you have boxwoods, where you get kind of these loosey-goosey, these kind of crazy shoots on the top. Real simple again. I could do this with hand pruners if I wanted to take my time. But basically all I'm going to do is just tighten it up a little bit. Just like that. So again, I didn't go too hard. I could have gone pretty hard. I mean, this is a general rule of thumb, but you never want to take more than 1/3 of the plant. So I could actually come, that plant was up here. I could actually probably come down into here and really cut it off, and that's fine. It's a young plant. I don't want to hurt it. I've basically taken off some of those taller shoots. What that's going to do is encourage more growth from down further and fill it out. So really, really easy kind of technique there. And then to finish up kind of the hollies and the boxwood section, I want to show you what happens if you prune too late in the season. Hopefully you can see this. So we prune, or I shouldn't say we, these basically had new growth on them. And then you can see what happened when that cold temperature hit it. They got kind of bleached out. Now this is going to reflush. It's going to be okay. In fact, what I'm going to do now is show you how you can kind of correct that. The good news is it didn't hurt it. But this is why we don't prune boxwoods or hollies in that kind of October, September, October time frame. Because what happens is when you prune, it encourages growth. And so when they're dormant right now, when they're not growing very actively, you're not going to get a flush of new growth right away. That's why I do say March rather than February. Because if you do it in early February, if you do it right now, if you go out and prune your boxwoods right now, and all of a sudden we get a warm couple weeks, then you can get new flushes of growth, and then all of a sudden we get a cold snap, and you get all this yellowing foliage on top. I know it looks kind of light green on your screen, but it's yellow. It doesn't look real sightly. It's not real nice. So what I'm going to take is, what I would do is probably wait till about mid-March. The weather's starting to warm. I don't think we're going to get a hard freeze. We're not going to get a big snow or anything like that. Or I'm not going to encourage new growth and then get that. So I like mid-March for boxwoods and hollies. But basically all I'm going to do here is just kind of tip off all that burnt growth. So we're just kind of taking that off. And so this is a little bit of a harder prune, but what it's going to do is really help this plant. So if we make mistakes, we can fix them. It's not going to be the end-all be-all. We can always take and fix our plants. So I'm just going to take this, and then you can see I've eliminated a lot of that burnt foliage, that got really crispy hard or got really kind of sheared off by some cold weather. So new growth going into cold weather is not good. You want that new growth to have a chance to harden off, and that's why we typically finish up our pruning in that August-September timeframe, so that if we do get flushes of new growth, it's got plenty of time to harden off before we get into the freeze period, which in this area, in our neck of the woods, it's about election day, November 15th is usually what I say. So our last frost is April 15th, so after April 15th, we shouldn't get another frost. And November 15th is the chance of our first frost. And so a frost or a hard freeze, when new growth is present on the plant, can hurt that new foliage. So we always want to be careful about when we're pruning things. Spring, it's a little bit more different. We're going to come out of it. It's not going to be growing much right now. It's going to really know what to do. We've had some late frost. We've had some late freezes. And plants have been through that before. So they're going to be perfectly fine. It just can damage kind of that new growth. You might have to go out there and correct it. I know a lot of people have hydrangeas that tend to shoot out new growth pretty soon, and then all of a sudden we get a late freeze. I think it even happened last year. And guess what? Your hydrangeas were probably fine. I don't think anybody lost hydrangeas. Maybe they didn't bloom as profusely as you had wanted, but that does kind of happen sometimes. So that's how you can correct it. I didn't bring any ligustrums, chindos, wax myrtles in here to prune. Let's talk about hedge plants, and let's talk about shaping real quick. And drawing this will, I think, help. This is a very helpful tip that I learned when I was working on our landscape crew. When you go out to prune things, you can use electric shears if you want to. You can use these hedge shears. But when you're shaping plants, you do want to be careful about how you shape them, because you can end up with something that you didn't necessarily want. So I'm going to do this kind of from a side angle so you can hopefully see kind of what I'm talking about here. All right, so if we're pruning in a round shape, what you don't want to do, let's see, what you don't want to do is end up like this. Because guess what's going to happen? You're going to end up getting a trunk on this thing, and it's going to end up looking like a little lollipop shrub. So let's say this is a boxwood or something, and we've pruned it. What happens is the sun can't get to this bottom portion, so you're not going to get a lot of growth. So let's say our sun's here, right? My kindergarten sun. And then it is hitting here, but it's not able to get down here. So you're not going to get a lot of growth from down here in the bottom portion of this plant. So if we're pruning for round shapes, ideally what you want is, if this is your, let's say this is your ground here. Ideally what you want is a round shape like this. So almost a dome. This allows the sun to be able to get all portions of that shrub. Now let's say we're hedging for a square shape, or we are pruning our plants into a square. You don't want a perfect square, really, because what happens is, I'm going to try and do this way so you can see. If you try and prune in a perfect square, so again this is our mulch or our bed, then what eventually is going to happen over time is the sun is up here. It's not going to be able to bend around and get down here. And then what you're going to end up with is something like this. You're going to end up with this guy. And then it's law. Then it needs a refresh type of prune. You're going to have to really take this and prune it hard here in order to get that to kind of come back to the shape that you want. So especially with hedges, which are pretty much, we're going to kind of really square them off, we want a slight taper in the bottom. And so what that means is your hedge would look like this from the side. So you can see that. So the difference there is, again, the sun can get here and the sun can get here. So it's very important when you're doing hedge plant or hedging or shaping of your plants for a specific desirable shape that we don't go after it to be perfectly square, because the sun's going to have a hard time getting to the bottom plant. That is always going to grow slower than the top. So if you ever get the opposite of this, then you're going to have to do some corrective pruning to get this to shape back up. So again, with boxwoods, hollies, with hedges, you're going to be always kind of looking to get kind of that shape. I'll show you a little bit on a conical shape when we get to this conifer here. That should help with if you're trying to do a pyramidal cone-shaped plant. So let's jump to evergreens real quick, since we're kind of in that same kind of feel. Evergreens like this conifer here, but also let's gold mop. So I've got a gold mop cypress here. You can see it's a little floppy, it's a little crazy, one of my favorite plants. And a lot of people don't prune these, and you don't have to. Again, you don't have to prune these. If you see a broken branch, if you see something that looks like it might be diseased or infected, then we might want to do that. Here I don't, so I don't see any issues. I do need to disinfect my pruners. So we'll take those. Just because I'm moving from some boxwoods and I don't want to spread anything, you never know. All right, so what I like to do with gold mop cypress is sometimes you get these wild kind of crazy shoots out of them. So I like to kind of think of this as a head of hair, a mop head. So what I will do is look for really big shoots of growth. I don't know if you can see this, but right here is a really big aggressive piece of growth. It's taking this plant over to this side. So you can see it from that angle right there. See how heavy it is over here and how light it is over here? If I want to kind of even this out, what I'm going to do is go in and take this out. That's that big shoot of growth. This is what I love to do in the December time frame when I'm making Maries, is go out there and do a little corrective pruning and use those in my Maries or in my fresh greens. But if you didn't do it and you want to use it and you want to get out there and do some pruning, now is a great time. So then again, I'm going to just kind of take this. We're just kind of trying to eliminate that growth. I mean, really that one branch really kind of took care of most of it. It is a little bit lighter over here. So what I want to do is maybe go through, and this is where I would use my hedge shears, and just lightly tip this one back. So again, I'm always cutting with an angle that I don't want to go in and cut these branches. If I do anything, I'm just going to lightly tip them, just so that it encourages more growth. But I don't want to prune them back because I'm going to end up with that shape that I don't want unless you're looking for that shape. But if you want this to be nice and full to the ground, if you start to go this way, you're going to lose this bottom. It's never going to come back from that. So again, you can't put it back on. So now I can come back and just kind of tidy up anything that I want to. And you can kind of see now that this side is coming back in and it's okay with this side. Now what I am going to do over here is again just do a very light tipping on it, just so I can encourage some growth. Just very, very light, not taking much off at all. And then that way, this side can still regenerate some new growth, and this side's been kind of held into check a little bit and cut back some. The most important thing that I can say about evergreens, juniper, arborvitae, spruce, any of the conifers, the evergreen conifers, is if sun doesn't hit them, then they're probably going to go brown. And that really means the center of the plant. So on a very full plant, I don't know if this one's done it yet. These are younger plants. But if you ever have a conifer like this and you go and you look on the inside and it's brown, meaning there's no leaves in there, right? So there's nothing in there that's green. So if I went and cut this thing really, really hard, it's not going to come back from that, most likely. And so that is the most important thing that I can say about evergreens, is never cut it into where it's brown, because then it might not come back from that. So with conifers, light shaping, consistent light shaping is very, very important. In fact, if you look at the list here of that one that I mentioned earlier, let's see if I can find. So pretty much all of, let's see, I think there was one that had juniper on it. Let's see. Yeah, so juniper pretty much has almost all the way across the board that you can prune. So really you can prune anytime, starting in November and December, all the way through the spring, all the way into about that July time frame. So you've got lots and lots of time to prune these and shape them, and so I recommend that because they can get out of control. I mean, I've seen gold mop cypresses, certain varieties, get to 7, 8, 9 feet tall, huge plants. And if it gets that big, you can't take it back down and cut it back down to the ground and let it reflush, like you could with actually a lot of plants. A lot of your broadleaf evergreens, or even your deciduous plants, you could do that with. You could cut them really hard to get them back into a smaller shape. It's going to take a couple years for it to revive from that, and I don't recommend it. The best thing to do with conifers is keep them in check over the long haul. So gold mop cypress is one of my favorite plants to grow, but if you don't go out there and give it a little bit of light shaping, take some of those large shoots out of it, then it's going to get pretty big pretty quick, and then it might be lost. You can't take it back. Now, let's say it gets to 4 or 5 feet high and wide. You can probably take a foot and a half off of that and be okay. But then you're going to be constantly kind of keeping it in that check area. So always slowly let it get to the size you want. And then that's the tricky thing about conifers, is you're never going to be able to prune it really, really hard. So kind of keep an eye on it. Now, gold mop cypress, typically, I love this plant. Typically, I'm going to let it try and get to a 4 to 5 foot size, 4 and 5 feet high and wide, kind of in a dome shape. But I consistently, over that 10-year period of growing that plant to about that size, I'm going to be kind of keeping it down. Now, I've seen people keep these at 2 to 3 feet tall. It just is a little bit more consistent. You just got to do a little bit more pruning, so it's not as low maintenance as it can be. But just a light shaping on it every once in a while. It encourages new growth. And in the spring, this is going to shoot out with all brand new yellow growth. It's going to be gorgeous, bright and full and sunny. So really, really nice plants and very easy to do. Just kind of, again, with a little bit of hand pruners, a little bit of hedge shears, really easy to do. So now let's do this arborvitae, and I'm going to see if I can, let's see what happens if I put it on the table. see how much you can see. You can't see a whole lot of it, but let's do some corrective pruning. You can see this sometimes happen on Arborvitaes where you get a little bit of brown in there. That is somewhat natural. This feels like it's actually, yep, it's a broken branch, so that's okay. In here, you can see little parts of it. So you see that? I don't know if you can quite see in there, but I've got some browning in here. That is completely natural. So just like a pine tree drops its pine needles, Arborvitaes, junipers, they're going to drop needles as well. That is completely natural. Doesn't mean your plant is dying. It also means that a lot of sun's not getting down here, and that's normal. So if we go and let's see if we can look inside the inside of this plant here. If we look inside, yep, see, we got some browning in there. I don't know if you can quite see that, but there's some browning in there. There's some loose needles, and that's fine. That is completely natural. That is completely normal. So don't think your plant is dying. It's because not a lot of sunlight is getting in there. So you're not going to get a lot of sun in there, which means you're not going to get a lot of new growth. Now, to shape these, it's a little bit trickier. So I'm going to try and do this. I'll try and do this portion, and then I'll put it back down, and we'll do the top portion so you can see. But really what I'm doing here is, again, I'm not pruning it too hard. I'm just taking my hedge shears. They're nice and sharp and ready to go. Brand new. I just opened them. And I'm just kind of taking and pruning it very, very lightly. And all I'm doing is basically taking some of that fluffy kind of weaker growth, that lighter growth, and just cutting it back a little bit. And again, you don't have to do this. It's just kind of, I think it helps it kind of tighten it up. So if you're looking for a little bit more of a formal shape in your plant, then you can do that. These are great. This is a emerald green Arborvitae. A lot of us grow them in this area. It's a very easy plant. It doesn't need a lot of this. In fact, you don't have to do this. So you don't really need to. I was just using this as an example of how to prune these. So basically, I'm just going to do one side here. All right. Now we'll bring it down so you can see, look at the difference. This is a little bit loose, and this is much more uniform and much tighter. So we'll do this side over here so you can see that again. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going up and down. And all I'm doing is just, I'm taking off maybe an inch at the most, maybe 2 inches on some. But really all I'm doing is tightening up. So again, you can see how that has created that nice sharp line. And so that's all I would do is just work all the way around it. Now in the landscape, you might have to get down on your knees. You might want to get a kneeling pad or something. But here I can move it all around so you can see it. All right, so let's see. Did I lose my nice sheared side? Yes. Okay, so there's my sheared side right there. So it's a nice cut. I've got a couple shoots up here. You can see this one. It's kind of hanging out by itself. So I definitely want to take that back in nice and tight. And then all I'm going to do is just keep my shears angled on that. You can almost see that line, right? And then it disappears. So right there. And then we're just going to do that. What you don't want to do with the top is whack it off and flatten it off. You can do it. It's not going to kill the plant. It's not going to hurt it that much. But what it's going to do is plants grow from a leader, basically. So this is always going to be its point up here. And if we take that and flatten it off, it's going to try and regrow that point. But there's going to be competitors. And what that means is there's going to be multiple branches that are going to shoot out looking to be that main one. And you can get kind of a crazy top. So we don't want to top a plant. We typically never want to top a plant unless we're looking for that kind of branching habit. But most likely with these, you're not. So always keeping it nice and tapered. And the taper, I think, is one of the hardest things to accomplish when you're pruning in the landscape, is to get that nice pyramidal shape. And the top is usually where we make our mistake. We cut it off too much. If I flatten this and then I realize I made a mistake, it can be corrected. So when you get those new shoots of growth, find the one that's closest to the center, find the one that's the strongest and closest to the center, and eliminate the other ones. That'll allow that one to take over, and then you can get your point nice and back. You can also round these a little bit, so if you wanted to round them, I could take it and just kind of come up like this and go back down. But keeping a nice point to it, I think looks really good. So there you go. That's how you do it. You can see that nice taper. What I've also accomplished here is the sun can hit every part of this plant. There's no part that is dipping under, and when it dips under, especially with a conifer, you're not going to get any growth. So it's never going to come back from that. So it's really important to know that, especially when pruning topiaries, that we try not to, topiaries are going to have a bottom because it's going to be a spiral pattern, but trying to not have it get too far out. So what I mean by that is on a topiary, you wouldn't want your bottom spiral, or let's say it's a pom-pom. I'll draw this for you so it's a little bit easier to see. on a pom-pom, a really basic kind of topiary, right? We've got a top, we've got a middle, and then we've got a bottom, right? Kind of like a snowman. If this guy, if I let the middle one get bigger than the bottom, again, it's going to block the sunlight from reaching down in there. So you always want to keep them tapered. You always want to keep it so that the sunlight, think about that before you start pruning, that you always want to be able to allow the sunlight to get to all parts of the plant if possible. Now, if you're growing a hedge of these and they butt up to each other, that's perfect. That's what you wanted, right? That's what you wanted was a hedge. If it browns, that's okay. You're not going to be able to see it. Everything that's outward facing, that's facing the sun, will stay nice and green. All right, let me move this one out of the way. And let's do a couple other evergreens real quick. Abelia is a great one. Love this plant color. It can get a little wild. I actually don't mind the natural shape of them a little bit, but if you want to tighten them up, I think it's kind of important. They flower in the summer. They flower on new growth, so you don't have to worry about cutting your blooms off. But all I'm going to do here is just kind of shape it. I'm just taking off those long shoots. And you might do this again as we get closer to summer. And again, I'm always keeping my mind on saying, don't cut down here, don't cut this off. So what I'm doing is trying to open that up to allow the sun to get to all parts of this plant. Abelia, it's important to know that Abelia, you really don't want to do any kind of hard pruning on. So if you're doing hard pruning, you would only want to do that probably in the March time frame. Allows it to reflush right away. Abelia is kind of one of those weird semi-evergreens. It's evergreen in our area. If we got a really, really cold winter, or if you live a little bit more into a zone 6 or 5, you might lose the leaves on this guy. But Abelias are hardcore. They can come right back from it. So if you do need to give it a hard shear, that's okay. Just make sure to do it in March so that it can reflush in April pretty quick. I like to do it mid to late March, actually, because you're really not going to see any growth on them until that time frame. So again, just kind of tipping everything off. And there we go. We got a nice, tight little plant here, and this is going to reflush. I've got lots of little prune points on here. You don't have to be super, super specific. This is going to get a nice flush of growth. Abelias, a lot of other types of plants, spireas. Now, if you're talking about a spring blooming spirea, don't prune them early. Wait till after they're done pruning. But you might get some shoots coming out of it. Quince is another one that can do that. There's a lot of different types of plants that'll get some crazy wild new shoots. Russian olive is a really common one that does that. So if you do that, then that's where your kind of handheld pruners come in. You get that wild shoot. When it comes up, you can just pick it off. That allows it to flush from the center. Because a lot of times, some people might call them like water sprouts, especially in trees. Those will take energy away from the rest of the plant. So it's putting a lot of energy into one shoot of growth. That kind of eliminates it, allows it to reflush. So that's an easy one. The next one I want to show you is Nandina. So Nandina, a lot of us grow Nandina as one of my favorite plants. It's super, super low maintenance. But if you want to shape it to kind of get it back into a shape, then you can. A lot of people don't. They have a natural shape by themselves. If you shear them a little bit tighter, it's okay. You can make them look round. You can make them box. You can do a lot of different things with them, but they do typically have more of a natural shape, and I think that's what they should look like, is a little bit more natural. But sometimes you get a little bit of that. Again, we're trying to correct this thing. I see the shape of the shrub. See if I can get so you can see that nice white background. I see the shape of the shrub right in here. So this piece right here is a little wild for me. So we're going to take that off. Just like that. And there we go. I've got a nice even shrub. I might even take my handheld pruners and come in here. And just because I cut into some thicker wood and I didn't cut any of this, so I know that it's going to grow a little bit stronger from here. So I might go in here and just prune this back just a little bit more. So you can see those two kind of thicker wood chunks that I took out of there. Didn't ruin the shape, but what that does is get it a little bit further down, which means it's not going to grow quite as aggressively from this area. Or it'll allow this side to really kind of catch up with it. So again, I could tighten this up really, really tight, but I like them kind of in their natural shape. And now it looks like a nice, pretty plant again. All right, and then the other Nandina. So this is not a true domestic Nandina, but I brought it in as a sample. This is actually the lemon lime Nandina. But I brought this in as an example of how to cane a plant. And so by caning, we talk about this a lot with raspberries and blackberries. I'm not going to get into super, super specifics there with raspberries and blackberries. If you're growing them, it's kind of similar to a rose. pick your 7 to 9 best canes and then eliminate all the weaker wood, dead wood, all that kind of stuff. But we won't get into specifics there. But caning is a popular technique with Nandina, because if you've ever grown a domestic Nandina, you then get 5, 6, maybe 7 feet tall. They're pretty big plants, big pockets of red berries. Love the plant, it's awesome. But they can get a little tree form, and you might want to reflush. And a lot of times you'll see some growth down around the bottom. So imagine this is a 5 to 6 foot tall Nandina. I've got this big piece of growth here, and I want to show you what I mean by caning. And basically that's going in all the way down to the bottom. So I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom of the plant, and I'm going to take that whole chunk out. So you see I got this tree out of here. And so now I can reflush that Nandina. So now I can take my domestic Nandina, and I've got some shoots. Now if you've got, let's say you've got 10 canes, right? 10 good canes, there's no growth down in the bottom. Cane about 3 or 4 of them out. Take 3 or 4 of them out, allow that to regrow from the bottom. As it starts to regrow from the bottom, you can take your other canes out. You don't want to take them all off and then just be like, eh, good luck, see if it comes back. Give it some time to start reflushing from those cuts that you made from that 3 to 4, let's say, of your 10 canes. Maybe take 30% of them off. And then you'll see some new growth coming this spring. Then you can go and eliminate the other canes, and you can bring your shrub back down to size and allow it to regrow again and try and keep it a little bit fuller from there. But that's only if you want to. Domestic Nandina, your heavenly bamboo Nandina is what some people call it. Those are natural. They're supposed to look kind of like that, so you don't have to do this. This is just if you feel like you want to reflush it and get it back into size, or if you want more growth at the bottom and less at the top. Then you can cut some of those canes out, let it reflush, and then cut the rest out from there. All right, let's talk about ornamental grasses. A lot of us grow ornamental grasses in this area, especially like pampas grass. So pampas grass is a really common one. It's big, it's thick. Here is my best advice when pruning grasses. Wear gloves, right? So kind of, I didn't use them on the roses like I should have, but on a grass I will. And that's because there's little kind of barbs on the undersides of grass blades. And as that grass gets bigger, like pampas grass, it can really cut you up. It can cut you up pretty severe. So hedge shears, again, love these guys. This is going to come in handy. This is a dwarf fountain grass, but this, let's again pretend this is a pampas grass, but pretend it's a big one. So what I'm going to do is basically cut it off. Now, when do we want it to do ornamental grasses? That's a great point that I need to bring up. It's always kind of variable. It kind of just depends on the year that we're having. We haven't had a very cold winter. I know we're going to get some cold days here pretty soon. So I wouldn't do these yet. I think brown grasses like this look really, really pretty. If you already cut it, you're okay. Nothing's going to really severely happen, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But let me prune it first and show you. So what you want to do is just kind of take this. Depending on the size, how close you're going to get to the bottom, you don't want to cut it down and shave it right down to the ground. But a real simple process there of just cutting it off. Now, when I would typically do this is about the mid-March time frame. The worst thing that you could do is wait too long, and then you've got shoots of new growth coming up through here. And so when you've got shoots of new growth coming up and then you prune it, you're cutting off all your new growth. Really important on liriope. I'll show you liriope in a second. But so make sure you're doing it before you get new growth, and you can always go and look. If you're a little worried about the weather, you go and look inside the plant and you see some new shoots, go ahead and prune it. It's better to do it then, because after it starts to reflush with new growth, going in and trying to selectively prune out all of these little tiny brown pieces is going to take some time. So go ahead and prune it. And you want to prune them somewhere. It depends on the size of the plant. So for this one, I did about 6 inches from the base. On a pampas grass, it might be 12 to 18 inches, just depending on how big the plant is. So very, very easy to do there. But basically, you're just going to cut off the top, round it off a little bit on the sides. Maybe I'll take it and just kind of round it off just a little bit here so you can see what I mean. So there we go. All right, and then I think this is a really helpful technique because a lot of trash can collect in there. So what I like to do is go in there with my gloves. Again, make sure you have gloves on because you don't want to razor blade your hands all up. And I like to just kind of lightly pull. I'm not pulling real hard. I'm just making sure that there's no big dead chunks in there. If you've ever been to a shopping center typically, or maybe you've got one in your yard, but a pampas grass that has been just sheared and then walked away from, and nobody went and cleaned out the inside, then you're going to get a a hole in the center of your grass, basically, where no new growth is going to come from that center. So just by taking my hand and just lightly kind of pulling out any debris, look, I got a leaf out of there. Just by doing that really helps open up that area and allows the new grass to shoot out. So it's a very simple process, especially as your grasses get bigger and older. If you don't do it, you're typically going to get a hollow center. That can be corrected. Don't worry. The way to correct that, unfortunately, is you actually need to dig up the plant and dig some chunks and cut it up and then redistribute it around your yard. But if you've ever seen a big old one and there's a big hollow center on the inside, that's because nobody went in there and cleaned out the debris on the inside. Now, if we actually got a big heavy snow or something, or we got a rain and then a freeze afterwards, if that happens after you prune it, the chances of getting some crown rot are possible. It's not very likely, but it can happen. So that's the thing that you want to be careful about, and watching your temperatures and watching your weather forecast. Is if I prune this now, and then I know we've got a chance of snow over the next week or two, then if we got a really wet snow or something that sat in there, it can rot that crown out, and that grass that was there actually protects it. So that's why I say wait till about mid-March, early March, maybe even late March, depending on what weather patterns we're having. You typically won't get a big freeze or a big snow after that, so you're usually pretty good, depending on where you live. But that's a very good technique, is going out and cleaning it out. And then if we do happen to get a lot of rain and then a freeze or heavy snow, you're probably going to be okay. You could go out there and try and remove some of that snow, although snow is an insulator, so I don't recommend going and knocking snow off shrubs. It's actually not a good idea. You actually want to let that snow in there. It's just like an insulator on your plant. But on a grass, you might go in there and scoop out some of that snow, especially in the center heart of your grass. That way it doesn't rot out the crown. All right. So then liriope. So we all know liriope. A lot of us grow. This is my green liriope, and this is probably what yours looks like, which is kind of flat and lifeless. I, again, probably wouldn't do this yet, but I want to show you how to do it. It's pretty hard, actually, to do this with hedge shears, unless you have another person that trusts you, because what you would love to do is have somebody hold this up and just hedge shear it, and you cut it right off. So I typically resort to my pruners, my handheld pruners. I'm going to hold a bunch of it like a bunch of grass, and I'm just going to go in and chop it off. So let me do one side of this so you can see the difference. Now, what I used to do is I used to always grow this in my first home pretty close to the edge of my where my lawn met my flower beds. And then sometimes I could just take the mower and kind of lean it up and then drop it on there and mow it down real low. The worst thing that can possibly happen with a liriope is that all of a sudden the new shoots start to come up. And again, same thing as the other grass. So there you can see half of it pruned, half of it not pruned. And this you want to prune to about maybe like 2 or 3 or 4 inches from the ground, nice and tight, so that all that new shoots can grow out. This will all die off and become food for the plant. It'll all become organic matter for the plant. But if you left it on, it's kind of unsightly, so all we're doing is just kind of cleaning up. So instead of all this going brown, it'll just be a little bit of this, and you won't see it as much because that new grass will come out. Now, if the new grass shoots do start coming out, you just got to be a little bit more careful that you're not pruning off those new shoots. Otherwise, that grass is what you get, basically. You're not going to get a whole another, you'll get some more flushes of growth, but you won't get a whole lot more after that. So all of this is from last spring when it all grew up. And so if we prune it and it's got new shoots of growth out there, you're going to have pruned edges on all your grasses. So that's why we do it early. And again, that's probably around that mid-March time frame. All right, so I don't really need my gloves anymore. Done with my grasses. Let's go on to some of the trees here. I do want to talk about some trees here for a second. Crepe myrtles, of course, are the important one. And crepe myrtles, Althea, butterfly bush, the rose of Sharon and Althea, hibiscus, vitex, they all kind of fall in the same general idea of pruning it into thicker wood is going to promote bigger blooms. Now, crepe myrtles, a lot of people talk about crepe murder. Crepe murder, to me, has always been cutting it in the same exact spot every year. And what you end up getting are these knuckly looking, gnarly things that can actually severely hurt the tree and damage the tree. Crepe murder could also be taking a 12-foot tree and cutting it to 4 feet. If it has to be done, then you can do it. It's going to be some corrective action after that. If you've ever pruned a crepe myrtle, you're going to know that you get a ton of new growth. And so what you want, or what you don't want, is if you cut it down to 4 feet and you get all this new growth, you really need to go through that and selectively allow some more branches to be formed out of that, which again, kind of that central leader part that I was talking about. If you top a tree, you're going to get lots of crazy growth. Same with the crepe myrtle. Then you need to go in and select the 3 to 5 pieces that come out of that one branch that you cut hard, and then you're going to have to form those into new trunks of the tree. So it's a little bit more hard to do. So I don't recommend doing it. What I do suggest is, let's say you need to lower the tree. It's gotten too big, you got to make it smaller. Take some off this year. Take a little bit more off the next year. Take a little bit more off the next year. That allows the tree to recuperate from that and not be hurt as much. And crepe myrtle, like I said to me, is those shopping centers that cut them in the exact same spot every single year because they get 4 feet of growth and that's what they like. It's the perfect size. They don't want to change it, and so they do it in the exact same spot every year. That can create problems over time. So what I'm going to show you is basically how to prune a young crepe myrtle. So I'm going to pull this up here so that you can see. I think we all know crepe myrtles, and we all know this is what a lot of crepe myrtles look like, right? I've got 5 branches on the inside, 5 main trunks, but it's really bushy down here. There's lots of branching down here, so it's very difficult to really see what the tree is in this. So what I'll do is, I don't know if I'll be able to do the whole plant, so maybe I'll do half. Maybe I'll do these 2 sections here and leave these sections so we can see the difference. What I'm going to do is basically say, okay, this is my trunk, right? So right here is my trunk. So I'm going to take everything off of it to create the tree habit. So I'm going to take most of these branches off. And these, with crepe myrtles, I like to cut fairly close to the trunk. A lot of times we'll say don't cut into the collar. Crepe myrtles are a little bit different. They're a little bit stronger. So they'll be able to heal from that a little bit easier. Cutting into the collar of like a big live oak could be bad. But something like a crepe myrtle, if you don't cut it, if you leave a little bit of space of that branch sticking out, you're going to get growth from there. So by cutting this off nice and flush to that trunk, then we're going to eliminate the possibilities. I got a sucker here. Suckers are another problem with crepe myrtles. What I will recommend always with suckers is making sure to get as much of it down to the base as you possibly can. So I'm going to go in really hard here and make sure that I get all of that. All the way down, and so you can see I almost got down into the roots there with that, which is great because now that sucker hopefully won't come back. So now all I'm doing is just kind of following this pattern up. I'll turn this a little bit. So here's a choice I got to make. I've got this branch. It's a pretty hardy branch. It's a pretty significant part of this tree, but it's a little bit lower. I'd like to get this canopy up into here. So I'm going to take it off. And with crepe myrtles, I don't have to be too concerned. Plus, I'm eliminating some of the inside growth, which is going to really get some sunlight in there. And that's basically what I've got here. I've got this nice branch. So again, I'm going to do it over here on this one. I'm going to eliminate this sucker over here because it's kind of getting in my angle, my view there. Same with this one. All right. So let's see. You got a couple more choices here. Now, here's a great example of how to make a decision on a crepe myrtle. So here I've got this nice straight branch. I've got 2 significant pieces here that are breaking out, so you can see them right here. One here, one here. One. These are 2 significant portions. I don't think I want to eliminate this section. I think I'm going to start to treat this as now a trunk. So basically what I'm going to do there is I'm going to take that, I'm going to leave this portion on. And the nice thing is, if I feel like I need to take it off, I always can later. But right now, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to eliminate this one because it's inward facing. And then we're just going to keep going up. And then here, I've got the same exact decision. So I've got another branch here. It splits again. I've got 2 strong portions. And you want this to continue to branch up and up. So I don't want to just end up with, a bunch of these where it's just one branch. So let's say I eliminated this one here. So if I took this one off, then all I would have is just these long straight shoots of branches. So I'm just taking off all of this weak little tiny growth in here. I don't want any of that. And then there you can see it. So now you can see the difference, right? I've got all this kind of messy stuff down here. Over here I've got these nice 2 simple trunks. Really, really nice. So now I'll bring it down. Hopefully you can still see. And we'll do the top real quick. So a lot of times you're going to see leftover seed pods up here. You want to cut those off. You're not going to get very strong growth out of that. Over here is my prune section. Let's see if I can barely get off the screen here. But over here, I'm just going to take and tip it. So I just want to get them all at about the same height. And there you go. So I left them a little bit higher here, a little bit smaller out here, and a little bit smaller. So I'm kind of creating that rounded habit. So if I went back and did this portion, then it would look just like this portion. I'm going to have a really nice looking crepe myrtle. So let me show that to you again here so you can kind of see. So see the difference? Kind of shrubby looking over here. Now crepe myrtles are shrubs. We're the ones that want them to look like trees, and they're okay with that. I'm going to get a lot more growth from these nice strong branches. I'm going to get a lot of strong growth. I'm going to get a lot of pretty growth. Now once these get to 15, 20 feet tall, depending on the variety that you got, you can let them go. You don't have to do that. Pruning does create bigger blooms. So if you're really looking for that bigger bloom, I recommend getting, an 8 to 10 foot, 12 foot height one, and then you can do some selective pruning. If you got a 20 foot one and you want to bring it back down to size, my recommendation is take some off this year, some off the next year. So next year I would come down a little bit further. The year after that I'd come down a little bit further. So really bring this back into check. Rather than just taking it right now and cutting it really hard down here, then you're going to get a lot of crazy growth, and you're going to have to do some corrective pruning for probably 2 or 3 years after that to get it to shape back up to the way you want. So it's real simple with crepe myrtles. Don't cut them in the same spot every single year. Try not to just cut them really, really hard. You're going to end up with a lot more work after that. Take them down over time, but also you don't have to prune them. And if you do, this is the recommended way. Limb them up, get some of that weaker growth off, tip it on the top, so just take some of the tops off, take the old seed pods off, cutting into a little bit of growth allows for bigger blooms. So really easy. And that goes for butterfly bush, vitex, all of those kind of deciduous, even your blooming trees. So think of like plums and cherries. Those all can take kind of a similar pruning. On a plum or a cherry, you might just be dealing with one trunk, obviously, and you're just going in and kind of doing some selective pruning. You're going to see more of that when I do a Japanese maple next. All right, so let's do that. So here I've got a Japanese maple. We're going to start at the bottom, so again, you can see the bottom here. Disinfect my pruners. All right, so Japanese maple, let's say it's a cherry tree, maybe it's a purple leaf plum, could be a lot of things. Maybe it's a maple, maybe it's an oak, and it's young or something that you want to kind of train up. So what we think of trees, obviously, is a trunk and a top. If we drew a tree as a kid, that's what we thought of. But now you can grow these in a lot of different ways. This is a Japanese maple. A lot of us love to tinker with these. It's a lot of fun to prune these because you can do so many different things. You can bonsai them. You can prune them up into a lollipop type of tree. You can do a lot of different things. You can shape them and force them into different directions as well. So the first thing that I obviously see is this guy right here, this branch right here. Do I want to take it off? Do I not? That's a tough decision. I think personally I do. I've got this nice forking right here, so you can see this nice habit here where these two branches, that might be, I might even go a little bit higher than that. We'll have to see. But I'm pretty confident I want to take this big shoot off. So again, I'm going to go in here. I'm actually going to use my loppers for this because it's a little bit of a bigger branch. I want to make sure I get a nice clean cut on it, and I don't want to be struggling with these and smushing and smashing too much. So I'm going to take these bigger lopping shears, and there we go. And so that's a nice clean cut. I didn't cut into the collar too much, but it's perfect. That's just exactly what you want. It's on an angle, so you're not going to have any issues there. All right, so then the next decision is, do I want to take these off? And I like to do this, and that's why, again, I love doing this in the winter because there's no leaves on it, so I can kind of take it and bend it a little bit and say, yep, you know what, these are pretty weak. These are really strong. So I've got these 3 really strong branches up here. I've got these 2 weaker ones. They're never going to catch up. And I kind of want a tree look out of it. I really want it to be like a tree. So I'm going to take those off as well. So now I've got this nice tree trunk here. I've got a couple little weak wood in here. You can see those little branches in there. We're going to take some of that off just to clean it up. I want it to look really, really nice and clean. I'm actually going to take this little side shoot off. And we'll take this one, and then we'll stop. So we'll say that's where we're stopping. That could be all I do. And I think that's kind of cool looking now. I've got this nice little tree shape here. So you can see I've got this, and these I'm now treating these 3 branches, these 3 main trunks here, as a trunk itself. So this is the main trunk, and then I've got these offshoot trunks here that I can now start to limb up over time. If I wanted this to be a canopy that I can walk under, and this is a great advice for plums and cherries and things alike. So I don't want to prune up anymore. So now what I want to do is do a little light tipping. And this is just going to, again, increase vigor and help it grow. So let's see, maybe I'll move it here so you can see. I want you to be able to see that silhouette, and then I'll get off to the side here and just show you this kind of tipping technique. I mentioned tipping a lot, and what I'm looking at is trying to get some sort of shape, some sort of idea of how I want to shape this. So I've kind of got that. And here what I'm looking for is I've got two little buds here. I'm pruning right above the bud. And again on that angle. And all this is going to do is just encourage more vigorous growth. You don't have to do this. You can let it grow from that. So plants grow from that terminal bud, as I was mentioning, slowly and surely, and sending off some shoots here and there. But if I go and take that terminal bud off, then it's going to produce more growth from underneath. And that's all we're really trying to accomplish by tipping. And it just tidies it up, kind of tightens it up a little bit, makes it look nice. And there we go. Got one over here that's kind of shooting out. Another one that's a little bit farther out. And this one maybe could come in just a little bit. All right. So there we go. We've got a nice, tidy little plant here. And again, envision this being a big tree. You can do this to bigger trees too. Of course, once they get too big, you might not do it. Missed one. And there we go. So I've got a really nice Japanese maple here. It could be a small cherry tree. Could be something like a crepe myrtle, kind of similar idea. This branching might kind of show up a little bit better so you can see it. But that's the basic idea, is we're trying to limit up a little bit, show off that trunk. That's what's so cool about Japanese maples, or the uniqueness of it. But again, this could be a cherry tree, a ornamental plum tree, even dogwoods, those types of things. Those are all really, really great things to prune right now. Disinfect your pruners. The reason we don't prune ornamental cherries, or even fruiting cherries, or plums, or apples, or pears in the summer, when we don't want to prune them in the summer, is because you're opening up wounds that insects and disease can get into. So in the winter, the sap is rising pretty soon, so you're going to get that flow in the tree again as it starts to come back out of dormancy. It'll heal off real quick, and there's not a lot of disease and insects in the air right now. So it's a good time to do that. So that's how we're going to do that Japanese maple. I know a lot of us have weeping Japanese maples. So I've got this weeping Japanese maple right here. You can kind of see it's a little wild. So we'll leave this one down. Actually, yeah, I can't get it up on the table. So I won't worry about the base. I've got some work that I need to do on the base of this to kind of clean it up. I've got some shoots that are actually coming out over the pot. So in the ground, this would have no trunk. It would just look like a shrub in the winter, or in the summer when it's got leaves on it. But what I'm going to do is kind of show you how you can kind of train a Japanese maple. As you can see, this one's leaning a little bit. So we've got this big lean over here. All the growth is up here. It's just going to keep on going that way. So I want to correct that for you. I want to show you how to correct that. And that is where that saw comes in handy. So what I want to do is look at this and say, where's my next piece of growth? So I've got a nice shoot over here that's coming this way. You can kind of see that one. So it's coming this way. I could take it off there, but I am a little bit worried about taking too much off of it. One, I'm trying to sell this plant, but two, I don't want to do anything too aggressive with it right now. So what I am going to do is take this main shoot of growth off the top up here. So we're just going to take this pruning saw. What I like to do is give it one kind of pull. So one pull gets that slot started, and then we'll just nice clean cut. So I've left the top on there. This actually has some nice shoots that are going backwards, back this way, so that might help. And what it's going to do is put some growth into this area. Now, eventually I could take it and prune it off all the way back to here and allow all this growth to really kind of form that shrub back over. But I've also can stake this. So that's the other thing is, you know, a Japanese maple, a weeping Japanese maple, I think we're all used to having kind of a big canopy being low to the ground. This one, as you can see, has been staked. It's been staked for height. And that's kind of cool what you can do with Japanese maples. You can stake them to get more height. So all I would have to do is correct this with a good stake. All I would have to do is just take this stake out, get a good stake over here, and slowly but surely I can work this plant back up to a vertical habit. And that's perfectly fine. In a pot, it's okay. I can plant this one straight up. So I can plant this nice and straight. So it's got that nice habit to it. But then I could also go in and limb this up. I could get a nice kind of lollipop umbrella shape on it. But I can do lots of different things with it as well. So I know this is kind of harder to see. Let's see if I can get it a little bit closer. All right. So here we go. This is what I kind of want to show you with these weeping Japanese maples, is a little bit of tipping can actually help shape it, and also watching the branching structure. So, and then I also want to talk about crossing branches. So this is a crossing branch right here. As you can see, I've got this one goes all the way up into here, and this one's coming from here. This is an important branch to me. It's in the lower portion of the tree. It's coming out far enough. This one's not as important. I got lots of other growth up here. So we're going to eliminate that branch altogether. And now I have no more crossing branches. This one can be left out on its own and do what it wants to do. And you're not going to have that rubbing issue. That's why we eliminate crossing branches, is because over time they can rub and create lots of issues. So we're eliminating that. Now you can also shape these to grow in a certain direction. Japanese maples get a lot of dead wood. So you can see that's a brown kind of twig piece of wood. So you want to get some of that dead wood out if you can. Usually it's going to come from a point where it just stopped growing and it just died back to the next best bud. And then also with shaping these. So again, we've taken off some of the top up here to allow this section to really kind of take hold. But let's say I want it to go in a different direction. So let's see if I can find a good example here that you can see. All right, so here's a good one. So right here, I've got this branch coming this way, right? It's going out to an area that maybe I don't want it to grow. Maybe I need it to fill in back over here. So I've got some branches that are facing this way. I've got some branches that are facing this way. So what I can do is say, okay, I want this to grow this direction. So I'm going to take it and eliminate the ones that are going that way. 45-degree angle, and now I've got a little branch down here. I know you can't see it, but there's a little bud branch over here that's going to come out, and now it's going to force all of this to grow this way. I've got some other branches that are coming this way, so I'm going to take those off to eliminate it going into these branches. And now all the growth is on this side of the branch. It's going to allow this branch to come out into this vacant area, this space that it can grow into. So you can also shape them. Japanese maples, the weeping Japanese maples, if you want to kind of get a little bit of a tiered effect, then a little bit of light tipping goes a long way. So just taking these tips and just cutting them back some is going to allow this plant to kind of form, again, more growth further back, and then allow it to kind of flow out so you can get this really kind of cool bonsai type of habit. And then I could really open this thing up if I wanted to as well. So I got a lot of small growth in here. I could go and eliminate some of that. This one I would actually love to just spend a day on and just kind of work. Maybe not, I'm not going to spend 8 hours on it, but a good hour just by myself, get a little bit of zen going, and just kind of go in and take some of this apart, take it out. I love being able to show in a Japanese maple the habit that's inside the plant. So just by taking some time and going through and eliminating some of the weaker growth and pruning it into a cool shape, you can make this a spectacular piece. Now you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to prune them, but it just does kind of, I think, kind of show off the different characteristics of a plant. So that's Japanese maples, kind of 101 for you. I've done a video on Japanese maples before, and I did a lot of pruning on that episode as well. So you can go back and check out that. Let's see if I've got any other plants. I think I've gotten to all of them. So I think that's kind of really going to wrap it up there. Again, there's lots and lots of different things that you can prune right now. Think about it this way. Oh, let me talk about hydrangeas real quick. I didn't mention that. We talked about crepe myrtles being very similar to butterfly bush, rose of Sharon. Butterfly bush, you're probably going to cut maybe a little bit harder. So butterfly bush, you don't have to worry about too much. You can kind of take that back. Think of it kind of similar to like a knockout rose, a shrub rose, a drift rose. You don't have to worry about it, but eliminating some of that weaker growth is going to help encourage bigger blooms and more of them. So what was I mentioning? Now I can't remember what I was talking about there. but yeah, so there's lots and lots of different types of plants that you can prune right now. There was one that I was just about to mention. I'm sure it was on my list. So let me go back and look at my list here and see if I can rehash what I was going, because I was going somewhere with it. Oh, so the different types of plants. So think about your plants and what you're pruning. Is it going to be blooming this spring? Azaleas, camellias, rhododendrons, forsythia. If it's going to be blooming in that March, April, May timeframe, you probably don't want to prune it. Oh, hydrangeas. Thank you. So thank you for helping me out. So you probably don't want to prune. Hydrangeas are a summer blooming deciduous plant. So when we're talking about crepe myrtles, rose of Sharon, those types of summer blooming plants, roses, those all will grow or bloom on new wood. What I mean by that is all the growth that you're going to get this spring is what it's going to bloom on this year. Hydrangeas don't quite fall into that same classification. And so hydrangeas are tricky. So let's talk about this. There's two different types of hydrangeas basically. There's old-fashioned hydrangeas, or this is the way that I like to classify them. Old-fashioned hydrangeas, and they only bloom on last year's growth. So if you go, and I know it's hard because you're looking at your hydrangeas, they look barren, they look like they need a good pruning right now. But if it's an old hydrangea and you've had it for a long time, or you just don't know, wait, don't prune it, because all that growth that you're going to prune off possibly could be all your blooms this year. So typically what I say is with hydrangeas is prune them after they bloom in the summer. So when you get that nice big bloom set in the first, late spring, early summer, then you want to go and prune them to allow them to reflush. You might even get another set of blooms. If they're a newer hydrangea, then most likely, like let's say Endless Summer, Nantucket Blue, and of course all the limelights, those all bloom on new wood and old wood. But like limelights are kind of a different group as well. So again, I don't want to get super specific, but limelights grow or bloom only on new wood. So pruning those now would be great. So if you got the little lime or the limelights and you want to do a little bit of tightening up on those, go for it. Prune them. You're going to get bigger, better blooms for it because all that new growth you're going to get blooms on. But old-fashioned hydrangeas only bloom on last year's growth. And so you don't want to prune them because you're going to lose all your blooms. So with hydrangeas, if you're not sure, the best thing to do, especially if you're trying to keep your hydrangeas in check, let's say they've gotten 5-6 feet high and wide, and you want to bring them back down into shape or bring them back down in size a little bit, then wait till they're done blooming and then prune them after they're done blooming. Enjoy the blooms, enjoy them for a while. What that does is say that's probably going to be somewhere in that, let's say probably June, maybe even into July timeframe. But when you prune them in June or July, the blooms are kind of starting to fade, you don't have a lot going on. Then what you'll do is when you prune them, you'll get all new sets of new growth. And all that growth that'll grow in August into September is where you'll get your blooms on next year. So you won't be cutting off your blooms. So hydrangeas are a tricky one. I also see gardenias. Gardenias, I mentioned, gardenias are really March. It's kind of a small window, but March, maybe February, late February, you can do gardenias for a light shaping. Again, they're evergreen, so don't cut them too hard. If we do need to do a hard cut on gardenias, wait till probably the mid to end of March timeframe. I always like to look at the plant if I see like buds are starting to swell, like it's about to start growing, then I know it's a pretty good time to prune. Azaleas are another very common plant grown in this area. They bloom in the spring, so enjoy them. Enjoy the blooms. Even if they're old and unsightly and you really need to prune them, I still say wait and enjoy the blooms, what little they might have, and then you can prune them. Now, hard, severe prunes, I don't recommend them, but on older established plants you can. So if your azalea has been in the ground for 10, 15, 20 years and it's unsightly, it's become a tree, you've had issues with it, it's starting to not bloom very much, and you want to take it and cut it pretty hard, you can. Wait until after you see all the azaleas around you that are done blooming, and then give it a hard prune. And then what you might want to try, jump off the screen here real quick, is Super Thrive. I love this product. It's awesome. It is a vitamin supplement, kind of takes the shock off of a plant. So if I'm taking a big plant and I'm cutting it back down or really close to the ground, I think I mentioned in my last video about Super Thrive, I took a camellia. It was done blooming in the spring. It wasn't blooming very good. It was kind of open. It was not really nice and shrubby and full. I took it, cut it right down to the ground, about 6 to 8 inches from the ground. I used a good amount of this because it was probably 20 years old. So I know that I put a lot of stress on it. I used probably half a bottle of this. It goes a long way. It's a capful per gallon. It's this little tiny bottle. But Super Thrive is one of my favorite things. So a capful in a gallon of water goes a long way. But I used a little bit more. It worked great. It's a really awesome product. And it's not a fertilizer, it just takes the shock off of a plant, gets it rejuvenated, gets it kind of going again, kind of like steroids for plants. Takes the shock off and gets it going again. And then real quick, I'll mention fertilizers. Whoop. So there's lots and lots of fertilizers out there, lots and lots of different types of plant foods. Of course, we love our McDonald green leaf. So when you're done pruning, and fertilizing is a whole nother webinar, because there's lots and lots of different types of feed, different types of plants. But when we get into the time frame where you're starting to see growth, or past our frost date, that is typically when you're going to want to start to feed your plants, especially ones that are pruned, because they're going to need some energy. All of those cuts that we've made are going to invigorate that plant to grow more and to get bigger and to put out lots of shoots of growth. And it's going to need some food. It's going to need some health to do that. And so our green leaf is a great one for your shrubs and perennials and a lot of different things too. So we've got our organic green leaf and we've got our traditional green leaf. This one's a 12-4-8. This one's an 8-2-4. So it's a very similar ratio, that kind of 3-1-2 ratio. Really, really nice, because it's got trace elements in it as well. So it's got all your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that you need, but it's also got boron and copper and zinc and molybdenum and all those great things that are really, really helpful when we need a plant to reflush and regrow. So that's kind of the end of it. It's a great time to get out in your yard, look at some of the things that you want to prune. If you've got questions, you can always reach out to us. You can take pictures, that might help. You can come and stop in. If you've got specific questions, I'm going to answer them now. But I think I ran through the basics of pruning, of what you can do now. There are some things that we can do later, and throughout the year, there's a lot of different timings for pruning. Hydrangeas, be careful. I always say wait till they're done blooming. Gardenias you can do now. Azaleas you want to wait. But abelias, conifers, crepe myrtles, your deciduous plants that are summer blooming, it's a great time to do that as well. But don't do anything that's going to bloom in the spring. You'll be cutting the blooms off. All right, everybody, if you're taking off, have a great day. I'm going to come over and answer all your questions now. I know that was kind of long, but we're going to try and get through your questions. And if you're taking off, we'll see you next time. Have a good one. All right. So hello, everybody. I know I saw a lot of questions scrolling through there, so hopefully I answered them just magically as I was going through my webinar, but we'll see. All right, so Yvonne said papyrus, and I think this has happened before where all of the comments, there's so many of the comments, that I'll probably have to go back and let's see if I can see all of them. It's not going to let me see all of them. So some of them are getting kicked off. So I saw one of them was papyrus. Papyrus is a ornamental grass. So probably in that section that we were talking about ornamental grasses, if it has gone brown, then yes, you can prune it back. Wait till probably that March time frame, because that tuft of grass, the brown grass, will actually protect the plant through this winter season. But once we're free and clear of any kind of major freeze or frost, cut the top off, let it reflush. It's just like any other normal grass. So yes, you can do that as well. Roma said, can we still access your hydrangea webinar? Yes, for sure. That is on our webpage. Go to mcdonaldgardencenter.com and scroll down. You'll see our webinar tab. You click on that and just scroll through. We've got a couple different pages there with all of our videos that we've done in the past with notes as well. Kwanzaa cherry tree. So yep, so Linda, I mentioned that when I was kind of pruning the Japanese maple. Very similar. Again, if you're taking off like a limb just because it's kind of low, overhanging, maybe it's in the way, you could do that now. It's the best time to prune. You can do a little bit of light shearing on the top as well if you need to kind of get it back into check a little bit, and that'll invigorate bigger and better blooms for sure. Now, with cherries and plums, they're going to bloom on basically every piece of wood that they have. So by pruning it back a little bit on the top, you're going to eliminate some of those blooms. But it's the best time to do it, because otherwise, if you prune after it's done blooming, you open it up to disease, infection, and insect issues like borers. And borers are hard to get rid of. So definitely still do that. Let's see, honeysuckle. So vines, I didn't really mention vines too much. Wisteria, you don't want to do because it blooms in the spring. Jasmine, you wouldn't want to do. And honeysuckle is summer blooming. So that's actually a good question. I wonder if that's on that list. And I don't think it is, because it's probably in vines. Oh, there's honeysuckle. So there we go. See, this is why I love this list. I know you still can't see it. There you go, a little bit of a better angle. But this thing is awesome. It's always got some great information. I can never remember everything in this head. So honeysuckle is May, June, and July. That's when you would want to prune it. And that's because it probably needs to just make sure that it gets through that spring bloom, and then you can prune it again and it comes back year after year, or keeps blooming actually after that. So do you sharpen your pruners, Karen? I don't know if you saw me do that, but I love that little handheld sharpener. I don't think I put it in my pocket. There we go. I got a mess here to clean up. Karen, yes, Sharpening my pruners, I've had my Felcos for a long time, and I probably sharpen them maybe once a year, if that. But this little handy sharpener tool is very, very easy. You can use the stones, you can use bigger ones. I just like this little mini one because it's super simple, it's easy to use. Let's see if I can show you a little bit more of a close-up here. So you can see my pruners have been through a lot. They're 15 years old, but they still cut so easy. So what I do is I'll take my blade, kind of, I'll put it at an angle here that you can see. I'll put my sharpening steel up against it at about a 25, 30 degree angle, and then just run it right down. And that's why I love this small one, is I can use it on these little tools very easily. You can actually see the blade almost coming back to life. See it getting brighter and brighter, I can, and now it's nice and sharp. So I love this. It's really easy for me to use. This is the one that I sell here. It's $24.99. It's got a little keychain and it's magnetized. So this is Bergen & Ball's Royal Horticultural Society sharpening tool. It's one of my favorites because it's small and it's easy to kind of have around. And it's lasted me a long time. So let's see. Redwood trees. So redwood trees, that's a good one. Not a very common plant in this area. It is... That's a good one. I don't know that I have the answer to that one. I would think, I kind of think of it kind of in a similar area as a bald cypress maybe. Redwood trees are evergreen, and I don't know if they're evergreen here, but redwood trees I don't know very well. I've never actually been and seen the giant sequoias and redwood trees. It's one of my life goals for sure. But I'll have to look into that one, Yvonne, and get back to you and let you know when the best time to prune. Now, if we're just doing some limbing up, if you're just doing some light pruning, you can really do that in the winter. I would think that right now is a great time to do that. If it's an evergreen, so then I kind of might group it into the conifer class, which is don't take too much off of it. That could hurt it. So I'll have to get back to you. I'll do a little bit of research. That's a good one. That's why I love gardening. I don't know all the answers, but now it forces me to find that answer for you. So I will let you know as soon as I know. Lilacs are going to bloom in the spring. Don't prune them now. Wait till they're done blooming. Forsythia, Karen, same thing. Wait till it's done blooming, then prune it. Pruning tall grasses. So I mentioned that in the grass section. So if you saw that one, I hope that helped, Larry. Prune them, cut them back pretty close to the ground, 6, 8, 10 inches, somewhere in that area, and then pull out some of the dead growth on the inside. It helps it kind of revive the inside of that. Climbing roses, Karen, I didn't mention climbing roses. That's a good point. Climbing roses, yes, you still want to do. Typically with climbing roses, you're not going to go down to those 5 to 7 canes. You're going to actually take it and just prune it back tight onto those main vines that are working through your trellis or support system. So a little bit different, you're right. You don't want to go back. You could cane them. You could take them back down to that 5 to 7 canes, but then you got to weave it all back in. So what I like to do is kind of take them back a little bit tighter, maybe tip it a little bit so that I get more, strong growth out of it. But you want to leave your main vines working through your trellis or support system. That's the best way to do your climbing roses. Just eliminate the weak growth is really all you got to do there. Rose of Sharon, Alex, I mentioned that, so I hope you saw that part. I didn't bring a Rose of Sharon in. Typically what I'll do with mine is just kind of tip it, limb it up if I'm trying to form a tree out of it, shape it, whatever you want to do. You're not going to hurt them, but by pruning them now, you'll get better blooms this summer. Can you do root pruning, repotting roses at the same time if they're in a container? That's a great suggestion for maybe a class in the future. Root pruning, yes, you can definitely do, and now is a great time to do it. So fall is when root systems really expand and grow, but on roses, they really expand and grow in the spring time frame. I would probably wait, Jeremy, until probably that March, April time frame, and then prune the roots then, and lightly. Drift roses, thank you for bringing that up, Roma. I think I got that as we were going through. Hi, Deborah. Let's see, climbing roses, I mentioned that one. Fertilize. So fertilizing after pruning roses. So right now, no. And what fertilizing can do, what feeding your plants now can do, is stimulate growth. And so when you prune roses, you're going to stimulate growth. And if we get a nice, 60-degree day for 3 or 4 days in a row, the rose might think it's spring, and you've got the feed there, and it's ready, and it's growing. So then all of a sudden we get a cold snap. So wait on your roses, wait on most of your plants until the end of March, early April to start feeding your plants so that they can grow in the spring. Watch your frost date. They'll put out some leaves, but they won't need food until we know it's safe for them to grow fully. Jasmine, I mentioned, you don't want to prune that. It blooms in the spring. So again, when it's done blooming, prune your jasmine. Oh, I didn't mention that. Warren, thank you. I missed that one. I actually brought it and I didn't even mention it. Warren asked, when pruning, do you need to protect the open wound at all? It's a great question. And I completely forgot. There are pruning sealers out there. So great question, Warren. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't because I don't recommend them. I sell them, I have them. This is an aerosol type of form of spray. And this is a kind of paint. It's kind of like a tar. So these, the only reason, you're probably like, why do you carry them? The only reason I carry them is because if you might have something catastrophic happen, let's say a limb breaks or something, it's got a really bad scar and it's dug in and maybe there's a possibility of collecting moisture in there. That's the only time I recommend these. And that would be really it. If something has happened that we need to protect the plant, let's say you have a cherry tree, a fruiting tree, an apple, a cherry, a pear, and you lose a big limb in a storm during the summer months and it's really exposed to disease and insect issues, I might recommend this. But really I don't. So if I'm pruning anything right now, I would not use this on anything. But if I accidentally prune something, and I always get confused on convex and concave, but let's say the wound is inward shaping. So let's say I've got a trunk. Let's see if I can draw this for you. I'm a visual learner, so that's why I draw everything, because I'm like, let me see if I can really explain. I can't explain everything in words, but drawing I can definitely do that. So let's say I've got a trunk here, or let's say I've got a branch, and then all of a sudden I've got this wound like that. So I've got a wound here, there was a branch here. Now I've got this area where rainfall, when it comes down, can collect. I've got a pool of water in here. That's not what I want. So what I would do is use the pruning sealer to seal that off so that the moisture can't sit there on that open wound. So let's say I prune something improperly, I prune into the collar, and I'm like, oh, I know this is gonna end up bad, then I might put a pruning sealer on it there. But I always try to let my plants heal themselves. It's natural for trees and plants to get wounds, and that's just like scabbing up for us, getting a scab on an open wound. That's what a tree is going to do as well. So I always try and let it protect itself and do it on its own. But if I feel like I need to help it, or I feel like I messed up or something catastrophic has happened, then I'll use the pruning sealer. All right, what causes the orange leaf color on boxwoods? Breeding, for one. A lot of them can get that. There are some disease or issues that can cause that. But typically it's a boxwood that's getting too much sun during the winter time frame or too much cold exposure. So, it's somewhat natural. Usually you're going to see it's going to be perfectly fine. So Eileen, what I would do is recommend that wait till the spring, see if it bumps out of it. If you get all new growth and it looks fine, then you're probably just going to see it. If it continues to get worse, and usually what you'll see on the leaf is a little bit of pitting on it, then you might bring in a sample if you live in our area. If you don't, then check out your local garden center. We might need to get some sort of a fungicide or something to treat that boxwood with. But typically that's pretty common, unfortunately, and plants just go through that, especially if they're getting a lot of afternoon sun during the winter time frame. And that means that they'll turn a little bit orange, maybe even maroon sometimes. That's pretty common. Usually it's natural. It's just kind of a protective action that it's taking in the winter. If it doesn't bump out of it, then we need to take corrective action because it could be a sign of stress and disease from other things. All right, so Jen said, how hard can you prune a hedge if they are taller than you? So Jen, it depends on how old the plant is. My general rule of thumb for safety purposes is no more than a third of the plant. So let's say it's 6 feet tall. I wouldn't want to take it below 4 feet. However, if it's 10 feet tall and it's been there for 20 years, you can probably take it down to 3 or 4 feet. It's going to take some time to get it rehabbed and get it, reflushed. So I'm talking, you go 50 to 60%. but it's going to take some time. Don't expect amazing results. So if you cut it really, really hard, you might get some crazy kind of growth. It's going to be sporadic. You're going to have to do some corrective pruning. And what I mean by that is you're going to get some large shoots of growth coming out, and you're going to need to go and prune that so that it can reflush. Because basically what you're going to get is these long kind of what I call water spouts or telephone poles, shoots of growth, and then once you prune those, you can reflush it and get it to kind of fill back out again. So it's possible. It's going to take some time. But if it's not that old, then take a third off now. Let it reflush a little bit. You can do, if it's just a normal hedge, you can do another prune in like the May-June time frame. So you can do another prune there to kind of keep it in check. And then we can keep over time working it down. It's going to be better than just taking it and cutting it really, really hard. But if you have to, and it's been there for a long time, you're probably going to be fine. Maybe try that Super Thrive if you're worried about it. So Kaylee said, I got on late. When should I prune my when should my rose bush pruning be done? Valentine's Day is a great day to remember. So mid-February to end of February, somewhere in that time frame, is when you want to prune your roses. It's a great time to do it. Dogwoods you can do now. Dogwoods, be very, very careful with. Make sure to disinfect your pruners. Do some corrective pruning. Dogwoods are naturally kind of crazy, which is why I like dogwoods, and I like to let them naturally grow. So I don't typically prune dogwoods. Now, if you need to prune it to control its habit, then do it. Yes, you'll be cutting off blooms this spring. But if you're going to do it, you better do it in the winter. It's a better time to do it. So right now, February would be your month to kind of prune dogwoods. Typically, what you're looking at with doing the dogwoods is taking a limb off here and there because it's gotten kind of sprawly or something. But dogwoods grow naturally and kind of crazy. That's why people love dogwoods. That's why they're prized, is because they're unique, they're all different, and they're not going to be a cookie cutter shape. And if you're trying to make a cookie cutter, you're going to run into issues. But if you're just doing some corrective pruning, you got rubbing branches, you got a low branch that you want to limb up, then right now, yes, is a great time. All deciduous trees right now, inevitably, yes, you're cutting off some of its spring blooms, but it's better to do it now than when disease and insect issues are out during that mid to late spring to summer time frame. Let them heal over, and that way that you're good. I didn't mention dogwoods, so then Janice said, yes, curious about dogwoods. So hopefully that helps. I mean, really, that's kind of what I was going after with the Japanese maple and the crepe myrtle, is trees in general. Great time. The only thing you wouldn't want to prune right now, because you would really be pruning off major blooms, is your deciduous magnolias. So things like royal star magnolias, saucer magnolias. But at the same time, if you're doing it to correct it, you're going to be eliminating that branch anyways. If you want to enjoy the blooms and then prune it, you can. That's the nice thing about magnolias, is they won't get hurt by being pruned a little bit later. Whereas you could be opening it up to disease and insects with your cherries, your ornamental fruit trees, your fruiting trees, your actual fruit trees, your dogwoods, crepe myrtles, those types of things. That's why we want to prune now, let them heal up, and that way you're good to go. So pruning trees is a great time right now. Same with red maples. Let's see, what about seed pods on taller crepe myrtle trees? So if it's tall, Jenny, and you want to cut them off, I don't know what to really tell you. You don't have to, is the good news. They're going to continue to bloom. I mean, we've got a crepe myrtle here on the property here at our Independence location. It's gorgeous. It's 25, 30 feet tall. Nobody prunes that thing. And it blooms great every summer. Are they those humongous blooms that you see on trees? No, but there's thousands upon thousands of them, so the whole tree looks gorgeous. So it doesn't really affect the blooming. All I say is, if it's a smaller tree and you want to do some pruning on it, if you're doing some corrective pruning, if you're trying to get it to shape upright, because as I mentioned, crepe myrtles are really just large shrubs that we turn into trees. So if you're trying to turn it into a tree, limb it up, tip it if you can, but if you can't, you don't have to, Jenny. You definitely don't have to. Mimosa. So Nadia, that's a good one. Mimosa is a pretty easy one. It's a summer blooming one. It blooms on new growth, so you can prune that now as well. You don't have to worry about pruning mimosas. What I will say about mimosas is they don't have a long extended life expectancy. And what that means is they could live 100 years. They could live 10 years. You just don't know. And that's kind of the weird thing. Like crepe myrtles, very long life expectancy. Red maples, Japanese maples, oaks, pines, river birch, most of your trees have a very long life expectancy. But mimosas, you just never know. They're kind of like weeping willows. All of a sudden, they just tend to go away. They also can sprout up all over the yard. But mimosas are easy. You can prune those now. You can definitely tighten them up. They get extremely long shoots of growth. So you're going to get 5-6 feet of growth out of it in a year. If it's just your common green mimosa, then you definitely will. So pruning it kind of hard is not a problem. All that growth that it's going to shoot out this spring is what it'll bloom on. So you can definitely do mimosa. So then she said, she said this first, how do you trim? So really, again, if you're looking to shape it, you can do that. If you're looking to cut it to get it back down to size, you can do that. You're not going to hurt it. And now's the time. So if it's corrective, if it's getting some lower limbs off, that's fine. If it's to prune it back down to size, that's fine. You're really not going to hurt it. They're kind of wild trees, which is probably what you're experiencing is I need to go prune this thing. And so you can definitely do that. You can shorten it up. You can tip it back. You can bring it back in. How much can you prune off? You could probably prune half. So I think you're fine with that. I'm cleaning, so Janice said, what are you cleaning my shears with? 1 part, and then Livia answered it, 1 part bleach to 10 parts water ratio. Thank you, everybody, for answering my questions. Approximately how much do crepe myrtles grow each season? Karen, it just depends on the variety. Natchez, Muskogees, Tuscarora, all your Indica varieties, those larger varieties are going to grow somewhere between 3 to 4 or 5 feet a year, especially when they're young. But as they get older, they start to peter out. You don't usually prune them. If you just let them just kind of be natural, then they'll stay kind of, in that 1 to 2 foot range at most. And a lot comes from the inside. So eventually they start to kind of, looks like they're not growing much anymore. Everything continues to grow. But then you've got dwarf varieties like, now they're blanking on me, but Tonto, Dynamite's kind of in that mid-range dwarf size. I'm trying to think of all the names, Hopi. So there's a lot of other ones that stay in that 10 to 15 foot range, and they're only going to grow maybe 2 to 3 feet a year. And then of course you got your dwarfs, your bushes, the ones that say somewhere between 1 to 2 feet tall to 5 to 6 feet tall. They might grow a foot a year or less, 3 to 4 inches, depending on the variety. So it really depends on the variety. So Shay said, anything special for yews? Yews you can do right now. So yew is kind of in that group of evergreens. It doesn't flower necessarily. Everything flowers, but it doesn't necessarily have an ornamental flower. So it's just pruning to shape. Yews, it depends. There's lots of different varieties of yews. There's the prostrata, the ones that grow straight up. There's the ones that grow a little bit more flat to the ground. There's the bushy ones. So there's a few different varieties of yews. But now's a good time to prune just to shape. I wouldn't typically suggest taking a yew and cutting it back real hard. Kind of group it into that conifer evergreen area where it's not going to do real well if we cut it too hard. So just some light shaping on it, some corrective pruning is perfectly fine. Hydrangeas, hydrangeas, hydrangeas. Thank you all for helping me when my mind went blank there. How do you follow up pruning after doing a hard restorative pruning on azaleas? So Shay, I think I've kind of touched on it, but that's a very good question. When we do a hard pruning on something where we've taken 70% of the plant off, we've cut it back down to a stump maybe, you're going to get some small growth, you're going to get some long shoots of growth, hopefully. And what I mean by corrective or how to restore that's a great way of putting it, is you're going to get these shoots of growth. And so think of it as a young, small plant. I don't know that I have a good example. Let me see if I've got something here that I could. I don't think I really do. Let's see. This might help me kind of explain this. But let's say you got, your azalea and it's starting to grow. This is a boxwood. But you've got this growth here. You've got this shoot, right? So I've got this shoot of growth, and let's just say I've just got this. I've only got this one shoot of growth. If you just let it grow from there, it's going to take forever to come back. And what I mean is there's a terminal bud here. It's going to grow from that slowly. It's going to spit out a branch here and there. But if I take it and the restorative type of pruning, I'm just going to take this and cut it. 45-degree angle, cut it. That allows more branching from the inside. Let that regrow. Cut that back. So by pruning, you can actually restore. And so what I mean by getting it back into shape is basically keep on pruning. Don't stop. Don't prune it really hard and then let it sit for the next 3 years. It's always going to be kind of wild and gangly growing. But if you take it and you keep on pruning those tips off, then you're going to keep spurring new growth from the inside. And then, of course, feed your plant. If you're doing really hard pruning, maybe use this Super Thrive. I really do love this stuff. I know it looks hokey. It even says the 1940 World's Fair gold medal. It is the best stuff. It is awesome. It really can bring a plant back. All right, so let's see. Everybody's saying thanks. Good, good, good. I'm glad everybody enjoyed it. Thank you, Mary, Joan, Jan. Jenny said, I have an Acer palmatum dissectum with some branches that are black. Is that an issue when pruning? Disease or damage from heat, perhaps? But when I scratch the branch, it's green underneath. So Jenny, I've seen that before. I would say probably if it's something small and you don't mind taking it off, take it off. It's probably something that's, but some Japanese maples just get a very dark bark color. So maybe watch it this spring. Maybe mark them with a little like twist tie or something, put a little marking on there so that you can come back and look at it and see if that color has gone away somewhat. And then that might just be the color that you're getting in the winter time frame, because a lot of Japanese maples, the bark will change colors in the winter. Think of like your sengokakus, your coral barks. They'll change colors. I mean, if you look at them in the spring, you'd have no idea that they got super, super bright pink in the winter. So I would say check that first, is just make a little marking on it somehow, and then come back and check and see what it does this spring. If it is just black and it looks like it's struggling, it's not growing very well, by all means, for sure, prune it off. Disinfect your pruners before and after you make the cut, and cut into some good growth. So instead of just taking that black piece off right where it meets the healthy flesh, I guess I would say the healthy bark, if you take it off right there, it can continue to keep on going because maybe it's already in there. So I'd probably go back another 2 or 3 inches from that, maybe even all the way back to the main trunk or to a sub-trunk part of it, where that way you feel pretty comfortable that you've gotten it all out of there. But yeah, if it's not growing well from that section, I definitely recommend doing it. But it's green underneath, so yep. So I mean, definitely scratching the bark, that's a great technique. Jenny, I didn't mention that, but scratching your bark is a great way to see if the plant is still alive. If you're worried about cutting something off and you think it might be a dead piece of growth and you scratch it, then if there's green underneath, then it's still alive. But I would say, Jenny, mark that and then come back to it this spring and check it out. All right, so I have Leyland trees, about 10 years old, and it's still about 7 feet tall. Any product I can use to help boost the growth. So that is kind of surprising because Leylands do grow very, very fast. There is a Arborvitae green giant that looks very similar to a Leyland, and they grow much slower. The idea behind that was that the root system could keep up with it and they wouldn't blow over like Leylands sometimes do. If you're pretty sure it's a Leyland though, yes, there are some things that we can definitely do to help generate some more growth by doing that light tipping. So I don't know if you saw that part, but by doing that light tipping on the conifer and just taking and shearing it a little bit is going to allow it to regenerate and grow a lot more. Then maybe using a product like Super Thrive, maybe it's something, it's a little bit under stress, it's under some stress. Use this in about that April-May time frame as it really starts to kick some growth. And then of course feeding it. And then the last thing would be mulching. Make sure you don't have weeds growing up or grass from your lawn growing up real close to the base of that tree because those are going to take the energy. Those are going to take all the food that you're putting down. It's going to take the Super Thrive. The grass is going to look gorgeous, but your tree's not going to grow. So putting a nice mulch ring around that will keep the weeds out, keep the moisture in, keep it strong, keep it well rooted. We might even look at some sort of rooting food, something like a blooming and rooting formula, which is going to help kind of generate more roots, a root stimulator type of thing. So I would try those. I would try Super Thrive, a little light shear, feeding it this spring, and see if we boost it and put some mulch around it. I think all those things will really help boost that plant for you. So Yvonne said we grow them off Little Neck, the redwood trees. Very interesting. I'll have to come and check those out sometime. But I will look into that, Yvonne, and I will get back to you because now I'm intrigued as to how and when you would prune the redwood trees. Let's see. Paula said lavender plant that isn't strong enough to hold flowers up. So yes, pruning encourages thicker growth as well. So if you've got lavender, lavender and rosemary, I wouldn't maybe prune right now. I would wait a little bit closer to when we get into that area where we're growing a little bit more, when we've actually got flushes of new growth. So if you've got lavender or rosemary, those types of things that you need to come in and do a little check prune on them, get them back into size, but also to encourage stronger stalks that can hold up these flowers, then yes, pruning will help that. For sure. And again, no more than a third, but prune it and then let it grow and then prune it, and all that is going to do is help thicken up those branches behind it. Penny said, I have a hydrangea tree. So hydrangea trees are usually in that new growth blooming. So if you know the variety Tardiva, Limelight, if it's any of those, you can prune it now for sure. You can prune it, bring it back. It's going to bloom this summer on new growth anyways, and so it's a really, really good corrective thing to do or to help stimulate more growth and bigger blooms. So right now you should be fine. If you know the variety and you want to check back with us, then let me know. But if it's Tardiva, which is pretty much the most common, or Limelight, you're fine. So Lori said, how about indoor Schefflera bonsai? Great question, Lori. I love to say, so bonsai is a tricky one. The true nature of bonsai, I know, deals with triangles and all that, and I don't know enough about it to really kind of speak at length about it. What I can say about bonsai, or what I think bonsai is that kind of feeling of zen, that open habit, being able to see the structure of the plant. So when do you prune it? Probably again as we get closer to spring, when we know that we're going to get some regrowth. So that would be what I would recommend, Lori, is probably in that March-April time frame, as plants, even indoors, begin to kind of feel the warmth, and the more sunlight that we're getting outside, you'll get more growth. And so that way, if you're pruning it and you prune a little bit too much, you've got that spring growth coming in right behind it. But you can really pick at bonsai really anytime. So bonsai, is always kind of like, I'm going to take this one off today, and then I'll kind of look at it, and then, especially like juniper bonsai is trying to form the pads. But anyways, but when you can do it, March, April time frame. Nadia said, thank you very much for coming. Shay said, thanks. Let's see, I prune the lower limbs, but not sure if it helps. They're over 10 years old. Thank you for your advice on my lemon trees. Great webinar. Well, thank you. The lower limbs. So if you prune the lower limbs off, that's fine. If you're forming them into trees, that's okay. That's not going to hurt it. That's not going to affect it from growing very well. I'd say try my other things first. So let's look at doing a light tipping, just to kind of open up that or allow that plant to really kind of form more branches behind it. Just by doing that light shearing, it's going to form a thicker growth behind it. Then wait till about the March-April time frame, put some Super Thrive on it, maybe some green leaf, some plant food, and then make sure you got a nice layer of mulch, 2 to 3 inches of mulch underneath. I think that'll keep the moisture in and keep it really, really growing for you. All right, thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. If I missed your questions, it's probably because they scrolled off my page. So I'm going to go back and check those out. I'll answer them on Facebook. And I hope everybody has a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week and weekend. And we hope to see you. If you live in our neck of the woods, come and check us out. We got a lot of new things coming in. And spring is coming. So get out there and get some pruning done. And we'll be on to a next topic next week. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.